tattooed man walks into an elite Seoul fusion restaurant, and everyone recoils like he's carrying a disease, except one exhausted waitress who risks her visa, her brother's freedom, and her life to save him from a meal laced with industrial poison when she says 4 words, "You need to leave." She has no idea she's protecting Yongdi, the shadow king of Korea's most ruthless syndicate, disguised to hunt the rats infesting his own empire. What began as an act of defiance will ignite a war that burns the restaurant to ash and elevates her from invisible labor to untouchable power. But is Tracy ready to discover that the man she saved doesn't dial the authorities, but his own executioners? If you've ever wondered whether one courageous moment can rewrite your entire destiny, keep watching. This story will prove that sometimes the stranger you protect might just become your greatest protector, but in ways that will shatter everything you thought you knew about justice. Hit that like button if you still believe mercy is stronger than fear in this cold world, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, whether you're in Seoul, New York, or anywhere between, because this story belongs to anyone who's ever felt invisible. And let's dive into this incredible story. The rain in Gangnam doesn't wash anything clean. It just makes the concrete shine like broken promises. It was a Friday night in late autumn, the kind of night that crawls under your skin and whispers that winter is coming to settle old scores. Tracy Rogers smoothed down her navy vest, grimacing as the fabric pulled tight across her shoulders. She was 27, but under the amber glow of Maison Lumiere's recessed lighting, she felt like she'd lived 3 lifetimes. Maison Lumiere used to be the jewel of Seoul's dining scene, a place where chaebols and K-pop executives came to toast mergers over wagyu and truffle risotto. Now it was a gilded mausoleum. The velvet chairs were fraying at the seams. The marble bar was chipped where someone had thrown a champagne bottle during a heated argument, and the management had rotted from the head down. "Table 14 needs their wine refilled, Tracy. Move faster or I'm cutting your hours." The voice sliced through the quiet hum of dinner service like a blade. It belonged to Guillaume Beaumont, but the kitchen staff called him Le Tyran behind his back. He wasn't just a cruel manager. He was a walking inferiority complex wrapped in an expensive suit 2 sizes too small, desperate to prove he belonged in a world that had never wanted him. Guillaume had seized control 8 months ago when the original owner, an elderly Korean woman, mysteriously lost the deed in a predatory loan scheme orchestrated by Guillaume's father. And he treated the staff like disposable props and the customers like walking ATMs. "Coming, Guillaume," Tracy said softly, reaching for the Bordeaux. She couldn't afford to lose this position. Her younger brother, Devon, was rotting in a Seoul detention center on fabricated assault charges, and the lawyer fees were bleeding her dry. Everyone mattered. Every shift was a lifeline. The dining room was 3/4 full tonight. A group of socialites picking at deconstructed bibimbap, an American businessman nursing his second martini, and the steady percussion of rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glowing chaos of Gangnam Boulevard. Then the brass-handled door swung open with a gust of wind that smelled like wet asphalt and gasoline. The man who entered looked like he'd crawled out of Seoul's underbelly. He was broad-shouldered but stooped, wearing a black hoodie so faded it looked gray. The fabric clung to him, soaked through. A dark beanie was yanked low over his brow, and ink crawled up his neck in intricate dragons and chrysanthemums, the kind of tattoos that told stories of blood oaths and unmarked graves. He stood in the entrance, rainwater pooling beneath his boots, his dark eyes scanning the restaurant with a stillness that made Tracy's breath catch in her throat. The hostess, a university student named Minseo, took one look at him and reached for the phone. Her hand trembled as she prepared to dial security, but before she could press a single button, Guillaume emerged from the back hallway like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Yeah," Guillaume's voice carried across the dining room, sharp and mocking, switching to rough Korean for maximum cruelty. "This isn't a pajang matcha. The street stalls are down the block. Get out." The man didn't move. He straightened his spine, and for a fraction of a second, something deadly flickered behind his eyes. Something ancient and unforgiving that made Tracy take an involuntary step backward. "I'm here to eat," the man said in Korean, his voice low and rough like gravel shifting in a river. "This is a restaurant, isn't it?" Guillaume laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "This is a Michelin-rated establishment. We have standards. Look at yourself. You look like you just got released from Suwon prison." The man glanced down at his muddy boots, then back at Guillaume with unnerving calm. "I have money. Cash. Does your standard apply to the currency or the man spending it?" The entire restaurant went silent. The socialites froze mid-bite. The businessman's glass hovered inches from his lips. Tracy felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Guillaume's face flushed crimson. He despised being challenged, especially by someone he considered beneath contempt. "Listen carefully," Guillaume started, stepping closer with his chest puffed like a rooster. "I don't want problems. I want you gone before you contaminate my establishment with whatever disease you're carrying." "I'm a paying customer," the man said flatly, stepping around Guillaume with deliberate precision. He walked toward a corner booth near the kitchen, table 7, and sat down. The wet fabric of his hoodie squelched against the leather. His movements were controlled, almost military in their economy. Guillaume looked like he was about to rupture something vital. He spun around, his eyes locking onto Tracy like a predator selecting the weakest prey. "Rogers," he hissed, marching toward her with clenched fists. "Get over here, now." Tracy hurried over, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Yes, sir." "Tell that gangster trash we're at capacity. Tell him the health inspector just called. I don't care what lie you use. Just get him out before he scares away my real customers." Tracy glanced at the man sitting in booth 7. He was staring out the rain-streaked window, his jaw tight, his hands folded on the table. He looked bone-tired, not dangerous, hungry, human. "Guillaume, we can't refuse service without legitimate cause. It's against." "I don't give a single damn about cause," Guillaume spat, stepping so close she could smell the sour espresso on his breath and the desperation soaking through his cologne. "You're here on a work visa, aren't you? How quickly do you think immigration moves when I make a phone call about an insubordinate foreign worker? How fast do you think they'll deport you while your brother sits in that cell waiting for a lawyer you can't afford?" The words hit like a fist to the stomach. Tracy's vision blurred at the edges. Guillaume knew. Of course he knew. He collected everyone's weaknesses like trophies. "I'll take his order," Tracy said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain. Guillaume's smile was venomous. "Good girl, but don't get too comfortable. I'm not done with him yet." Tracy grabbed a menu and walked toward table 7, her legs feeling like they were moving through water. The dining room felt like it was watching her, every eye tracking her movement. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. The socialites whispered behind manicured hands. The businessman smirked into his drink. But the man with the tattoos wasn't looking at any of them. He was looking directly at her. As she approached, she noticed details that didn't fit the narrative Guillaume had written. The hoodie was soaked, yes, but the fabric was expensive. Technical, waterproof material that cost more than her monthly rent. The beanie was cashmere, and the tattoos creeping up his neck weren't crude prison ink. They were masterpieces. Dragons coiled with impossible precision, their scales catching the light like they were breathing. Chrysanthemums bloomed in perfect geometric patterns. This was art that cost hundreds of hours and millions of won. Why was a man with tattoos worth more than a luxury car sitting in the cheapest booth in the restaurant? Why was he alone? And why did his eyes track her movements with the focus of someone who'd spent years learning to read people the way scholars read ancient texts? "Good evening," Tracy said, setting the menu down with hands that trembled just slightly. "Welcome to Maison Lumiere. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man's gaze held hers for a moment that stretched too long. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they seemed to see through her carefully constructed mask of professional courtesy straight into the exhausted, terrified woman underneath. "Water," he said simply. His voice was gentler now, stripped of the edge he'd used with Guillaume. "And your menu. I'll need a few minutes." "Of course," Tracy said, turning to leave. "Wait." She froze, her pulse spiked. "You're American," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. I'm from Virginia. Long way from home. Yes, sir. You don't have to call me sir. My name is D. He didn't offer a last name, just D. Simple, unremarkable, forgettable. But everything about him screamed the opposite. I'm Tracy. Tracy. He repeated her name like he was testing the weight of it. Your manager. He always treat people like that. The question caught her off guard. She glanced back toward the bar where Guillaume was watching them with narrowed eyes, his arms crossed over his chest. He's having a difficult night, Tracy said carefully, defaulting to the diplomatic script she'd perfected over months of surviving Guillaume's tantrums. That's not what I asked. Tracy met his eyes again. There was no malice there, no judgment, just curiosity, and something else, something that felt like recognition, like he saw her, actually saw her, not as a server or a foreigner or an obstacle, but as a person carrying weight she shouldn't have to carry alone. He's having a difficult life, Tracy said quietly. I'll get your water. She walked away before he could respond, before the crack in her armor could widen into something she couldn't repair. Behind her, she could feel his gaze following her across the dining room. It wasn't predatory. It was protective. And that terrified her more than Guillaume's threats ever could, because she'd learned long ago that protection always came with a price. The ink on his neck told a story of 1,000 funerals, but his eyes held something unexpected: mercy. At the bar, she filled a glass with ice water, her hands moving on autopilot. The socialites had returned to their meals, but their conversations were quieter now, punctuated by glances toward table 7. The businessman was on his phone, typing rapidly, probably texting his colleagues about the thug who'd invaded their sanctuary. Min Seo was pale, hovering near the hostess stand like she expected violence to erupt at any moment. And Guillaume was smiling. That was the worst part. He was smiling like a child who just discovered a new game. Tracy's phone vibrated in her apron pocket at exactly 9:47, the way it always did on Friday nights. She knew without looking who it was. The Seoul detention center had a schedule more rigid than the trains running beneath Gangnam Station. 10 minutes before lights out, they allowed inmates one final call to approved contacts. For Devin Rogers, that contact was his sister, the only family he had left on this side of the Pacific. She was carrying a tray of appetizers to table 12 when the buzzing started. Her hands tightened on the silver platter, knuckles going pale. The phone felt like a bomb ticking against her hip. She couldn't answer, not during service, not with Guillaume prowling the floor like a warden searching for infractions. But Devin only got one call. If she missed it, he'd spend the weekend thinking she'd abandoned him. Tracy delivered the appetizers with a smile that felt like broken glass cutting her face from the inside. The couple at table 12 didn't notice. They were too busy arguing about whether to winter in Jeju or Phuket. She bowed, stepped back, and made it 3 meters toward the kitchen before Guillaume materialized in front of her like smoke taking human form. Where are you going? His voice was silk stretched over barbed wire. Restroom, sir, just for a moment. Guillaume's eyes narrowed. He'd perfected the art of reading weakness the way cartographers read maps. You've been twice already tonight. Are you ill? Because if you're ill, you should go home. Without pay, of course. I'm fine. I just need. The phone buzzed again. Louder this time, or maybe it just felt louder because Guillaume's gaze dropped to her apron pocket like a hawk spotting movement in tall grass. Is that your phone? He stepped closer, invading her space with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. You know the policy. No personal devices during service hours. I know, sir. I'm sorry. I'll turn it off. Answer it first. Guillaume's smile was surgical. I insist. It must be important if you're willing to violate workplace rules. Tracy's throat closed. The phone buzzed a 3rd time. 4 buzzes meant voicemail. 4 buzzes meant Devin would hear a recording instead of her voice. 4 buzzes meant he'd spend another 72 hours alone in that concrete box wondering if she still cared. She pulled out the phone. The screen showed a number she'd memorized months ago. Seoul Detention Center, inmate communication line. Guillaume leaned in, reading the display with theatrical interest. Oh my, that looks official. Is everything all right, Tracy? She wanted to lie. She'd become fluent in lies over the past 8 months. Small ones, large ones, lies of omission that felt like swallowing glass. But Guillaume already knew. She could see it in the way his pupils dilated, the way his tongue darted out to wet his lips. He'd been waiting for this moment, hunting for it. "It's my brother," she said quietly. "Your brother?" Guillaume tasted the words like wine. "Is he in some kind of trouble?" The phone stopped buzzing. 4 buzzes. Voicemail. Tracy closed her eyes and felt something inside her chest crack clean through. "He's in detention," she whispered. "Awaiting trial, assault charges." Assault! Guillaume let the word hang in the air between them. That sounds serious. Expensive, I imagine. Lawyers, bail, court fees. How much does justice cost in Korea for a foreigner accused of violence? Tracy forced herself to meet his eyes. 50 million won, for a lawyer who might actually fight for him. Guillaume whistled low. That's nearly 40,000 American dollars. Quite a sum for a waitress making minimum wage plus tips. How much have you saved? 12 million. Leaving you 38 million short. Guillaume pulled out his phone, opening the calculator app with exaggerated care. At your current rate, accounting for rent, utilities, food, and the fact that I'm cutting everyone's hours next month due to slow season, you'll have that money in approximately 7 years. Will your brother still be waiting in 7 years, Tracy? The cruelty was surgical, precise. Guillaume didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He'd found the pressure point and was applying exactly enough force to make her knees buckle without leaving visible bruises. "I'm working on it," Tracy managed. "Of course you are. You're very dedicated. I've noticed." Guillaume glanced around the dining room, then back at her with an expression that belonged on a spider watching a fly test the web. "I may have a solution, an opportunity for someone willing to work hard and keep certain things confidential." Tracy's stomach twisted. What kind of opportunity? "Walk with me." Guillaume turned and headed toward his office without checking if she followed. It wasn't a request. Tracy trailed behind him, past the bar where Sarah, another waitress, was pouring wine with hands that shook just slightly. Sarah's eyes met Tracy's for a fraction of a second. There was a warning there. A plea. Sarah knew where this path led because she'd already walked it. Guillaume's office was small and expensive, decorated with framed certifications that proved he'd attended culinary schools in Paris and Lyon. The degrees were real. His talent was real. That was what made his cruelty so devastating. He could have been great, but he'd chosen power instead. He closed the door behind them. The click of the latch sounded like a cell door locking. "Sit," Guillaume said, settling into his leather chair. "We're going to have an honest conversation about your future here." Tracy remained standing. "I prefer to stand, sir." "Suit yourself." Guillaume opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. He set it on the desk between them like a lawyer presenting evidence. "Do you know what this is?" "No, sir." "This is documentation of health code violations I've observed over the past 3 months. Expired ingredients used in premium dishes. Temperature logs falsified to hide storage failures. Cross-contamination between meat and vegetarian stations. Would you like to know who signed off on all these inspections?" Tracy's mouth went dry. Guillaume flipped open the folder, revealing forms with her signature at the bottom. "You did. Or rather, I signed them in your name. Very helpful having copies of everyone's personnel files with signature samples." "That's forgery," Tracy said, her voice barely audible. "Yes, it is. And if the health department investigates, whose name appears on the fraudulent documents? Yours. Whose visa depends on maintaining a clean legal record? Also yours. Whose brother needs her on the outside, not sitting in a cell beside him for food safety fraud. How far will she go for her blood?" Guillaume leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "But here's the beautiful part. It doesn't have to be this way. These documents could disappear, shredded, erased, as if they never existed." "What do you want?" "Loyalty." The word came out soft as a caress and sharp as a scalpel. "I'm restructuring our vendor contracts. We're switching to cheaper suppliers. Lower quality ingredients, higher profit margins. Some of our more discerning customers might notice, might complain, might post reviews questioning the authenticity of our Michelin recommendation. You want me to lie to customers? I want you to manage expectations. If someone complains about the quality of their beef, you explain that it's a new preparation style. If they question the freshness of the fish, you assure them everything was delivered this morning. You smile. You soothe. You make problems disappear. That's fraud. That's hospitality. Guillaume's smile widened. And in exchange for your cooperation, I'll pay you an additional 2,000,000 per month. Cash, no taxes, no paper trail. In 6 months, you'll have the money you need for your brother's legal fees. In 7 months, he could be a free man. Tracy's mind calculated faster than she could breathe. 2,000,001 monthly. 12 million over 6 months. Combined with her savings, she'd have enough. Devon could afford a real attorney. Someone who'd actually read his case file instead of just showing up to collect a paycheck. And if I refuse? Guillaume tapped the folder. I make a phone call to the health department, another to immigration. By Monday morning, you're on a plane to Virginia, and your brother is alone in a Korean prison with a public defender who doesn't speak English. How long do you think he'll last? Is the money worth her soul? The office walls seemed to close in. Through the door, Tracy could hear the muted sounds of the dining room. Silverware on porcelain, muted laughter. The artificial atmosphere of people pretending their lives were perfect while the machinery of their comfort ground others into dust. She thought about Devon the last time she'd visited. How small he looked in the orange jumpsuit. How his voice cracked when he said he was scared. How he apologized for being a burden even though none of this was his fault. The assault charge was manufactured. A bar fight where he defended a Korean woman from harassment, and somehow he'd ended up being the one arrested when her boyfriend called the police. Self-defense didn't translate well when you were black and foreign, and the other guy knew someone in the prosecutor's office. How do I know you'll actually pay me? Tracy asked. Guillaume's expression shifted into something almost resembling respect. Smart question. I'll pay you weekly. Proof of commitment. 500,001 every Friday, cash in an envelope. If I miss a payment, our agreement is void. And the forged documents. Shredded the day your brother walks free. Tracy's hands were shaking. She folded them behind her back where Guillaume couldn't see. What exactly would I have to do, specifically? Tonight, for instance. Guillaume opened another drawer, pulling out a different folder. Table 7, the gentleman with the tattoos. I've prepared something special for him. A lesson in respecting establishments that are above his social class. You'll serve the meal. You'll ensure he eats it. And when he complains about the taste, you'll apologize and offer him dessert on the house. What did you put in his food? Guillaume's laugh was light, almost playful. Nothing fatal, just uncomfortable. Industrial-grade degreaser mixed into the sauce, enough to cause severe gastric distress. Vomiting, diarrhea. The kind of humiliation that will make him think twice before he walks into a nice restaurant looking like trash again. Tracy's vision blurred red. You're poisoning him. I'm teaching him a lesson about knowing his place. And you're going to help me, or you're going to lose everything you've been fighting for. Guillaume stood, straightening his suit jacket. 500,001 tonight, in your hands within the hour. All you have to do is deliver the meal and keep your mouth shut. He walked past her to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. I'll be watching from the bar. Make sure he takes at least 3 bites before you clear the plate. That's all I need. 3 bites and the cash is yours. Guillaume left her standing in the office, surrounded by his fraudulent degrees and his carefully constructed empire of mediocrity dressed as excellence. Through the wall, she could hear someone's phone ringing. Another call that would go unanswered. Another connection severed by distance and desperation. Tracy pulled out her own phone and opened her voicemail. Devon's voice cracked through the speaker, young and scared, and trying so hard to sound brave. Hey Trace, it's me. I know you're working. I just wanted to hear your voice before lights out. The lawyer you hired called today. He said he needs another payment by Wednesday or he's dropping the case. I told him we'd figure it out. We always do, right? A pause, background noise, someone shouting in Korean. I love you, don't work too hard, and don't do anything stupid trying to help me. I'm gonna be okay, we're gonna be okay. The message ended. Tracy stood in Guillaume's office, holding a phone that felt heavier than stone, and tried to remember what her moral compass looked like before survival had beaten it into a shape she barely recognized. Outside the office, through the small window overlooking the dining room, she could see Table 7. The man Guillaume called a thug. The man with tattoos that cost more than her yearly salary. The man who'd looked at her like he understood what it meant to be judged by your exterior while your interior burned with something too complex for strangers to comprehend. He wasn't just a customer anymore. He was a test. The universe asking her a question with no good answer. How much of yourself are you willing to destroy to save someone you love? Tracy walked back into the dining room just as the kitchen bell chimed. The burrito was ready. Guillaume was watching from the bar, one hand in his pocket where she knew he kept a cash envelope. Sarah was pretending not to watch while polishing wine glasses that were already clean. And at Table 7, the man who didn't know he was about to become collateral damage in someone else's war sat waiting for a meal that was supposed to teach him his place, but might instead reveal exactly who wielded the real power in this room. The man who gives the orders or the woman who decides whether to follow them. The kitchen at Maison Lumiere had two speeds, controlled chaos and barely suppressed warfare. Tonight it was leaning toward the latter. Tracy pushed through the swinging doors and immediately felt the temperature spike. Steam billowed from pots of bone broth. The grills sizzled with expensive cuts of meat. And in the corner, near the prep station where Guillaume stood with his arms crossed, something smelled wrong. Not rotten, not burnt. Wrong in a way that made Tracy's lizard brain scream warnings her conscious mind was still trying to decode. Finally, Guillaume said, waving her over with the impatience of a king summoning a servant. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost. Tracy approached slowly, scanning the stainless steel counter. There were 3 burritos plated and ready. 2 looked normal, destined for a couple at Table 18 who'd ordered the fusion special. The third sat alone on a pristine white plate, slightly larger than the others, wrapped in a tortilla that gleamed with oil under the overhead lights. Table 7's order, Guillaume announced, gesturing to the isolated plate like a magician revealing his trick. Our special guest deserves special attention. The sous chef, a thin Korean man named Junho, stood at the far end of the line with his back turned. His shoulders were rigid. He was scrubbing a cutting board that was already spotless, the kind of desperate busywork people do when they're trying to avoid witnessing something they can't stop. What makes it special? Tracy asked, even though she already knew. The question was a formality, a last chance for Guillaume to reveal a shred of humanity she suspected had been carved out of him years ago. Guillaume smiled. Authenticity. I wanted to give our tattooed friend a taste of something real, something with bite. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out a plastic bottle. The label had been torn off, but Tracy could see the warning symbols underneath. Caustic. Corrosive. The kind of industrial cleaner that came with instructions to call poison control if ingested. You put that in his food, Tracy said. It wasn't a question. Just a tablespoon, mixed into the sauce with the jalapenos and lime, masks the chemical taste quite well, actually. Guillaume set the bottle down with the casual confidence of someone describing a cooking technique. Junho was concerned about the legality. I reminded him about his mother's medical bills, how quickly those can pile up, how expensive cancer treatment is in this country, even with insurance. Tracy glanced at Junho. He was gripping the edge of the sink now, knuckles white. He wouldn't look at her, couldn't look at her, because looking meant acknowledging, and acknowledging meant accepting complicity. This isn't a prank, Tracy said quietly. This is assault, poisoning. This is a lesson in class boundaries, Guillaume corrected. That animal walked into my establishment looking like he just crawled out of Itaewon's red light district, covered in gang tattoos, smelling like cheap cigarettes and cheaper decisions. He needs to understand that there are places he doesn't belong. Does Guillaume know who he is messing with? Tracy studied the burrito again. From a distance, it looked perfect. Golden tortilla, professional presentation, garnished with cilantro and a wedge of lime. But up close, she could see the sauce pooling slightly around the base. Too thin, too shiny. The degreaser was breaking down the fat molecules, making everything slick and wrong. What if he dies? The question came out before Tracy could stop it. Guillaume laughed, actually laughed. He won't die, I measured carefully. 1 tablespoon won't kill him. It'll just make him violently ill, vomiting, cramping, maybe a trip to the emergency room if he's particularly sensitive. But death, he shook his head. That would be wasteful. Dead men don't learn lessons. He could sue, press charges. With what evidence? By the time he realizes something's wrong, the plate will be cleared. The food will be in the trash. And who do you think the police will believe? A respected restaurant manager from a prestigious family, or a tattooed thug who probably has a criminal record longer than your resume? Guillaume picked up the plate with both hands, holding it like an offering. This is your first test, Tracy. Deliver this meal. Make sure he eats at least 3 bites. Do that and you'll find an envelope with 500,000 won in the staff locker room within the hour. Refuse and I make my calls. Immigration, health department, your brother's lawyer. By midnight, your entire life collapses. The kitchen fell silent except for the industrial hum of the refrigeration units and the distant clatter of dishes from the dining room. Tracy could feel Junho's shame radiating from across the room. She could see Min Seo through the porthole window, refilling water glasses with hands that trembled. Sarah was probably at the bar, polishing those same wine glasses, trapped in her own silent bargain with Guillaume's cruelty. This was how empires of mediocrity sustain themselves, not through excellence, but through exploitation, by finding people with pressure points and applying force until they bent. What if I warn him? Tracy asked. What if I tell him what you did? Guillaume's expression shifted. The theatrical cruelty dropped away, replaced by something colder, more honest. Then I show him the surveillance footage of you helping Junho prepare the meal. The camera angle is perfect. It'll look like you were complicit from the beginning. And when the police investigate, whose fingerprints will they find on the degreaser bottle? Yours. I made sure of that while you were in my office. He'd thought of everything, planned for every contingency. This wasn't impulse. This was premeditation. Guillaume had turned cruelty into a system, complete with safeguards and plausible deniability. Tracy took the plate. The ceramic was warm against her palms. She could smell the jalapenos, the cumin, the cilantro. And underneath, barely perceptible, the sharp chemical tang of something that didn't belong in a human body. 3 bites, Guillaume repeated. That's all I need. Then you can clear it and bring him dessert. Something sweet to wash down the lesson. Tracy walked out of the kitchen carrying poison wrapped in a tortilla. The dining room had thinned slightly. The socialites had moved on to dessert. The businessman was signing his check. A new couple had arrived, shaking rain from their umbrella. The world kept spinning, oblivious to the small apocalypse unfolding at table 7. As Tracy crossed the floor, she caught her reflection in the rain-streaked windows. She looked professional, composed. The navy vest was crisp. Her hair was still in its perfect bun. From the outside, she was exactly what Maison Lumiere pretended to be, elegant, refined, trustworthy. But inside, she was screaming. The man at table 7 looked up as she approached. Up close, the details sharpened. The tattoos weren't just expensive. They were specific, traditional Korean iconography mixed with modern technique. The dragon on his neck had scales that seemed to shift in the light. Each one was individually shaded. That kind of work required sitting for hundreds of hours, enduring pain that most people couldn't imagine. This wasn't someone who made impulsive decisions. This was someone with patience, with purpose, with the kind of discipline that came from surviving things that broke weaker men. Your meal, Tracy said, her voice steady despite the hurricane in her chest. She set the plate down gently, centered it on the table. Professional, perfect, complicit. Looks good, the man said. D. He'd told her his name was D. I haven't had a decent burrito since I left California. You've been to California. Long Beach, years ago. He picked up his fork and knife, cutting into the burrito with surgical precision. Worked on the docks for a summer. Best Mexican food I've ever had came from a truck parked outside the shipyard. Tracy's throat tightened. He was making conversation, being human, treating her like an equal instead of a servant. And she was standing there holding the knowledge that could save him while her brother's voice echoed in her head, telling her not to do anything stupid. The man cut a piece of burrito. Steam rose from the filling. Beans, rice, vegetables, and sauce. Sauce that would burn him from the inside out. Sauce that would send him to an emergency room where doctors would ask questions he couldn't answer because he'd never see it coming. He lifted the fork. What happens when the first bite is taken? Wait, Tracy said. The word escaped before her brain could catch it, before survival instinct could strangle it. Dee paused the fork halfway to his mouth. His eyes met hers, dark, knowing, like he'd been waiting for this moment, like this entire scene had been choreographed and she was finally delivering her line. Is something wrong? He asked. Everything was wrong. The world was wrong. A system that forced people to choose between their integrity and their family's survival was wrong. Guillaume was wrong. The fact that she was standing here, trembling, unable to speak the truth because truth cost more than she could afford, was wrong. The sauce, Tracy managed. It's very spicy. You might want water ready. Coward, the word ricocheted through her skull. Coward. You're a coward dressed up in a vest and a lie. I can handle spice, Dee said, but he set the fork down, reached for his water glass instead, took a slow sip, watching her the entire time. Behind her, Tracy could feel Guillaume's eyes boring into her back. She could imagine him at the bar, hand in his pocket, fingers wrapped around the cash envelope, counting, waiting, judging whether she'd passed the test or failed it. Thank you for the warning, Dee said quietly, about the spice. There was something in his tone, a weight, an acknowledgement that they were talking about more than jalapenos. He knew, or suspected, or was testing her the same way Guillaume was testing her. This entire restaurant had become a maze of tests, everyone examining everyone else, looking for weakness, for loyalty, for the breaking point where survival instinct overrode every other consideration. Is there anything else I can get you? Tracy asked, defaulting to the script. The safe words. The armor of professionalism that let her pretend she was just a waitress doing her job instead of an accomplice to assault. Yeah, Dee said. He pushed the plate slightly away from him, not dramatically, just a few centimeters, enough to create distance. Can you tell me something honest? The question landed like a punch. I'm sorry. Everyone in this restaurant is lying. The couple over there pretending their marriage isn't dying. The businessman pretending his company isn't about to tank. Your manager pretending he's something other than a small man in an expensive suit. Dee leaned forward. But you're different. You're lying because you have to, not because you want to. So tell me something honest, just one true thing. Tracy's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back. I don't understand what you're asking. Yes, you do. His voice dropped lower, intimate, dangerous. You've been terrified since the moment you walked over here. Not of me, of something else, someone else. And that plate you're carrying like it weighs 100 pounds, something's wrong with it. The dining room seemed to contract. The oxygen thinned. Tracy could hear her pulse hammering in her ears, could feel Guillaume's stare like a physical weight, could see Devon's face behind her eyelids every time she blinked. One true thing. I can't, she whispered. I'm sorry, I can't. Dee studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. Okay. He picked up the fork again, cut another piece, larger this time. Tracy wanted to scream, wanted to slap the fork out of his hand, wanted to flip the table and drag him out of the restaurant and tell him everything. But her feet were rooted to the floor. Her voice was trapped behind the wall of fear and desperation that Guillaume had spent months building brick by brick. Wait, she said again, louder this time. Dee stopped. You keep saying that. I know. But you won't tell me why. I can't. Can't or won't. What's the difference? Tracy's voice cracked. Either way, someone gets destroyed. Dee set down his fork, pushed the plate completely away this time. Here's what I think is happening. Your manager, the one who looks at me like I'm something he scraped off his shoe, he did something to this food. And you know about it. And you're trying to decide if warning me is worth whatever price he'll make you pay." Tracy couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except stand there while this stranger dismantled her entire moral crisis with the calm precision of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out before. "I'm right, aren't I?" Dee asked. Behind them, Guillaume was moving. Tracy could see him in her peripheral vision, leaving his post at the bar, walking toward them with purpose in his stride. The test was over. She'd hesitated too long, warned too much, failed. "You need to leave," Tracy said urgently. "Right now, don't eat that. Don't eat anything here, just go." "Why?" "Because he put industrial degreaser in your food. And if you take one bite, you'll be vomiting blood in an hour. And I can't watch another person suffer because I was too scared to do the right thing." The words came out in a rush. A confession. A detonation. The moment they left her mouth, Tracy knew her life as she'd known it was over. Guillaume would destroy her. Immigration would deport her. Devon would rot in that cell, but at least she'd said it. At least one person would walk out of this restaurant knowing someone had chosen their safety over her own survival. Dee didn't move. Didn't react. He just sat there, processing, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it transformed his entire face from dangerous to something else entirely. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Thank you," he said simply. Guillaume arrived at the table. His face was purple. Veins bulged in his neck. "Roger's my office now." "I quit," Tracy said. The words felt like jumping off a cliff. "I quit, and I'm reporting you to the health department, the labor board, and anyone else who will listen." Guillaume's laugh was vicious. "You're finished. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Your brother's lawyer will drop his case by morning, and immigration will have you on a plane by Monday." "Worth it," Tracy said, and she meant it. Dee stood, slowly, deliberately. When he reached his full height, he was taller than Guillaume by at least 10 centimeters. The tattoos on his neck seemed to writhe in the light. "I'd like to speak to the owner," he said quietly. "I am the owner," Guillaume spat. "No," Dee's voice was soft, lethal. "You're the parasite who stole this place from its rightful owner, but that's about to change." He pulled out his phone and made a call, spoke 3 words in Korean. "Iron Dragon, now." Guillaume's face went white, actually white, like every drop of blood had suddenly abandoned his head in search of somewhere safer to hide. And Tracy realized with dawning horror and wonder that the man she'd just saved wasn't a victim at all, but something far more dangerous, and the first bite would never be taken because the real feast was about to begin. Tracy stood frozen at table 7, watching Guillaume's face drain of color. The 3 words Dee had spoken into his phone hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Iron Dragon. Now, simple, final, devastating. But this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She'd already confessed, already warned him, already burned her entire life down in a single moment of conscience. The story was supposed to be over. She'd made her choice. Now came the consequences. Except Guillaume wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at Dee with an expression Tracy had never seen before. Not anger, not indignation. Terror, pure, undiluted terror. Guillaume started, his voice strangled. "You're not." "Sit down," Dee said quietly. Not a request, a command. Guillaume sat, in one of his own chairs, at one of his own tables, like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. Tracy's mind was reeling. Nothing made sense. The man she'd tried to save didn't need saving. The victim was somehow the predator. And Guillaume, who'd spent months making everyone around him feel small, suddenly looked like a child caught stealing from his father's wallet. "You should go," Dee said to Tracy. "What comes next isn't something you need to witness." "I don't understand," Tracy managed. "What's happening?" "Justice," Dee replied. "The slow kind." Through the restaurant's windows, headlights appeared. Black sedans, 3 of them. They parked in a perfect line outside, blocking the street. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of soldiers. or executioners. Tracy felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't a rescue. This was an operation. "Wait," she said, her hand moving to her apron pocket where her notepad lived. "This is wrong. I have to." Her fingers found the small spiral pad she used for taking orders. The pen was there too, cheap plastic, almost out of ink. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip it. Because she'd gotten it backwards. She'd warned him too late, with words, out loud, where Guillaume could hear, where witnesses could see. She destroyed herself for nothing when the smart play, the careful play, had been right there all along. Write it down. Pass it secretly. Let him decide what to do with the information without burning her entire existence to ash in the process. "I need a minute," Tracy said, her voice distant even to her own ears. "I need to think." But time was collapsing. The men in suits were entering the restaurant. The businessman at the bar was grabbing his coat. The socialites were whispering urgently, phones out, recording or texting or calling for help that wouldn't arrive in time. Min-si had disappeared completely, probably hiding in the break room. The neon lights of the present faded into the steam of the past. Tracy was 12 years old, standing in her middle school cafeteria. Devon was 8. A sixth grader twice his size had him pinned against the lockers, fist cocked back, ready to break something. Devon had defended a girl from harassment. The bully didn't care. Young Tracy had a choice. Scream for a teacher and make Devon look weak, fight herself and get suspended, or find another way. She'd written 3 words on a napkin. "Cameras above you!" Slipped it into the bully's backpack when he wasn't looking. He'd found it 30 seconds later, looked up, saw the security camera pointed directly at him, and walked away. Devon never knew why the punch never came. But Tracy learned something that day. Sometimes the quietest intervention saves the most lives. The sharp crack of Guillaume's voice snapped her back to the cold reality. "Tracy," Guillaume was standing now, his terror temporarily overridden by rage. "Whatever you think you saw, you're wrong. That food is perfectly fine. You're fired for insubordination and slander. Get out before I have you arrested for defamation." Dee hadn't moved. He was watching her with those dark, knowing eyes, waiting, testing, like he already knew what she was going to do next and was curious if she'd choose the smart path or the honest one. Her hands were still trembling as she flipped open the notepad. The page was blank except for scattered notes from earlier orders. Table 12 wants dressing on side. Table 9 allergic to shellfish. The mundane architecture of restaurant survival. She clicked the pen. Once, twice, the sound impossibly loud in her head. "Don't," she wrote. The letters were shaky, desperate. "Eat," her hand cramped. She flexed her fingers, tried again. "It's poison," she finished. 3 words, 11 letters, a message that could save a life or end hers. Will Guillaume see the note? She tore the page from the pad slowly, trying not to draw attention, folded it once, twice, until it was small enough to fit in her palm. The paper felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Guillaume was still ranting, his voice climbing higher with each syllable. "You have no proof, no evidence. This is a respected establishment. My family has owned this property for decades." "Your family stole this property," Dee interrupted calmly. "Through a predatory loan to an elderly woman who couldn't read the contract your father forged." Guillaume's mouth snapped shut. Tracy moved, not toward Dee, toward the service station. She needed water, an excuse, something to make the delivery look natural. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, mechanical and distant. The water pitcher was half empty. She filled a clean glass, adding ice with hands that shook so badly she spilled some on the counter. Sarah appeared beside her, pale and wide-eyed. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered. "Who are those men?" "I don't know," Tracy lied. "Stay in the back, don't come out until it's over." "Tracy, what did you do?" "Something stupid," Tracy said. "Or something right, I'm not sure there's a difference anymore." She picked up the water glass. The folded note was still in her palm, pressed against the condensation-slick glass. She could feel it getting damp. The ink would run if she waited too long. Paper would disintegrate. Evidence would vanish. Now or never. Tracy walked back to table 7. Guillaume had fallen silent, his eyes tracking the men in suits as they positioned themselves around the dining room. One at the door, one at the bar, one near the kitchen. Strategic, professional, like they'd done this before. "Your water," Tracy said, her voice barely above a whisper. She set the glass down in front of Dee, the note hidden beneath her palm. Their fingers brushed as he reached for the glass. The contact lasted less than a second, but it felt like forever. His skin was warm, calloused, the hands of someone who'd built something with violence and precision. Tracy pulled her hand back. The note was gone, transferred, delivered. The message was his now. What is Yang Di thinking as he stares at her? Dee looked down at the folded paper stuck to the side of his water glass. He didn't pick it up immediately, didn't react, just stared at it like it was a test question he was considering from multiple angles. Then he looked up at Tracy. The eye contact was unbearable. She felt like he could see through her skull into the messy chaos of her thoughts, could see Devon in his cell, could see the half-packed suitcase in her apartment, could see every compromise she'd made and every line she'd almost crossed in the past 8 months. "Thank you," Dee said quietly, "for the water." He picked up the glass, took a sip. The note remained stuck to the wet glass, slightly translucent now. The ink was starting to bleed. The D and don't was spreading into the O. Tracy's heart hammered. He wasn't reading it. Why wasn't he reading it? Guillaume cleared his throat. "If we could return to the matter at hand." "Be quiet," one of the suited men said. He'd approached without Tracy noticing, moving with the silent efficiency of a predator. "Mr. Yang is thinking." Mr. Yang. Not D, Yang D. The name hit Tracy like cold water. She'd heard it before, whispered in the restaurant's kitchen, mentioned in news reports she'd scrolled past. The Shadow King. The man who controlled half of Seoul's underworld through networks so complex even the prosecutors couldn't trace them. And she just handed him a napkin note like he was a customer complaining about slow service. The note sat on the table between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Tracy's handwriting was barely legible, 3 words bleeding into each other as water from the glass condensed and spread. "Don't eat. It's poison." The letters trembled on the page the same way her hands had trembled while writing them. Yang Di picked it up. His movements were deliberate, each gesture controlled with the precision of someone who'd learned that survival meant never showing weakness, never rushing, never revealing what you were thinking until the moment you struck. He read it once, then again. His face remained perfectly still. No shock, no fear, no gratitude, nothing. The kind of blank expression that came from years of sitting across tables from men who wanted to kill him, learning to hide every thought behind a wall of calculated indifference. But something changed in the restaurant. Tracy felt it before she saw it. The temperature didn't actually drop. The heating system was still humming, pumping warm air through the vents. But suddenly everyone's breath seemed visible. The air felt thinner, sharper, like the atmosphere before lightning strikes. Yang Di folded the note carefully. Once, twice, creased each edge with his thumbnail. Then he slipped it into the pocket of his hoodie and looked up at Tracy. He was smiling. Why is he smiling? Not a grateful smile, not a relieved smile. This was something else entirely. The smile of a hunter who just watched his prey walk directly into a trap of their own making. The smile of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment and was savoring the confirmation that their patience had been rewarded. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the warning." Tracy's mouth went dry. "You need to leave, right now before." "Before what?" Yang Di's smile widened slightly. "Before your manager realizes what you've done, before he destroys your visa and your brother's case and everything you've been fighting for." He leaned back in the booth, completely relaxed. "Or before I eat the food." "All of it," Tracy whispered. "All of the above." Yang Di pulled out his phone. The movement was casual, like someone checking the time or scrolling through messages. But there was intentionality in the way he angled the screen away from her. the way his thumb moved across the keyboard with practiced speed. "Tell me something, Tracy. How long have you worked here?" The question caught her off guard. 8 months. And in those 8 months, how many times has Guillaume done something like this? Tracy's throat closed. "I don't." "Be honest." His eyes found hers, dark, knowing, unblinking. "How many times has he poisoned customers, sabotaged food, used the kitchen as his personal weapon?" "This is the first time I've seen him actually." She stopped, reconsidered. "But there have been incidents. A food critic who got violently ill after writing a bad review. A businessman who tried to poach one of our chefs suddenly developed a seafood allergy he'd never had before. Nothing proven, nothing traceable, but—" "Patterns," Yang Di finished. He was typing again, his fingers flying across the screen with the speed of someone sending detailed instructions. "Guillaume isn't just cruel, he's systematic. This restaurant is his laboratory, you're all his test subjects." "Who is he texting under the table?" Tracy tried to see the screen, but the angle was wrong. All she caught were fragments. Korean characters scrolling past too fast to read. Names maybe, addresses, commands. The kind of messages that turned speculation into action. "You need to forget about me and go," Tracy said urgently. "Guillaume will be back any second, if he sees us talking." "Let him come." Yang Di set his phone face down on the table. The screen was still lit, still active, like he was waiting for a response. "I want him to see us talking. I want him to see you standing here, protecting someone he tried to harm. I want him to understand what he's really done tonight." "What he's done?" Tracy's voice climbed higher despite her efforts to stay calm. "What he's done is put industrial poison in your food. What he's done is threaten to destroy my life if I don't help him. What he's done is turn this entire place into a nightmare where—" She stopped, took a breath. Her hands were shaking again. She pressed them against her apron, trying to hide the tremors. "Where good people have to choose between survival and mercy," Yang Di finished softly. "I know. I've been watching this place for 3 months." The words landed like a physical blow. "What?" 3 months. He glanced around the dining room, cataloging details with the focus of someone conducting surveillance. "I've had people eating here twice a week. Different faces, different tables, all reporting back. Health code violations, wage theft, sexual harassment. Guillaume's little empire of cruelty documented from every angle." Tracy's mind reeled. "Why?" "Because this building used to belong to someone I cared about." His voice went flat, empty. The kind of emotional desert that came from grieving something you could never recover. "My mother ran a noodle shop here, small, humble, but honest. She fed dock workers and taxi drivers and anyone who walked through the door hungry. Then Guillaume's father decided the property was worth more than her lease. Forged documents, predatory loans. Within 6 months, she lost everything. The neon lights of the present faded into the steam of the past. Yang Di wasn't in Maison Lumiere anymore. He was standing in a different restaurant, simpler, warmer. The air smelled like garlic and sesame oil and toasted gochugaru. His mother stood at the stove, her hair tied back in a faded scarf, stirring a pot of broth that had been simmering since dawn. "Di-ya," she called over her shoulder. "Stop daydreaming and bring me the green onions." He was 12, skinny, wearing a school uniform 2 sizes too small because they couldn't afford new clothes. He grabbed the cutting board and brought it to her, the green onions already chopped the way she liked them. "Good boy," she said, ruffling his hair. "One day you'll run this place, make it even better than your old mother did." "I don't want to run a restaurant," Young Di replied. "I want to." "Wanna what? Join a gang? Get tattoos? Break your mother's heart?" She wasn't angry, just tired. The kind of tired that came from working 16-hour days to keep a business afloat while the world conspired to sink it. "I want to protect you," Dee said quietly, "so people stop looking at us like we don't belong here." His mother set down her spoon, turned to face him fully. "Listen to me. Protection that comes from fear is just another kind of prison. Promise me you'll find a different way." Young Dee promised. And then he broke that promise 6 months later when his mother lost the restaurant to Guillaume's father, and died 3 weeks after that from stress-induced cardiac arrest. The sharp crack of Guillaume's voice snapped him back to the cold reality. "What the hell are you doing?" Guillaume had emerged from the kitchen, the bottle of industrial degreaser clutched in one hand. His face was flushed, sweating. The kind of panic that came from realizing a plan had gone catastrophically wrong. "Tracy, I told you to serve the food and clear the table. Why are you still standing there?" "She's standing there because I asked her to stay," Yang Di said. His voice was calm, conversational, but underneath it was something that made the suited men near the door straighten slightly. A frequency only dangerous people could hear. "We were having a conversation about family history, specifically about how this building used to house a restaurant called Halmon's Kitchen." Guillaume froze, the color drained from his face. "How do you know that name?" "Because my mother was Halmon." Yang Di stood slowly, unfolding from the booth with the fluid grace of a predator rising from rest. "And you're standing in a building your family stole from her corpse." The restaurant went silent. Even the background music seemed to cut out, though that was impossible. The soft jazz still played through the speakers, but somehow all Tracy could hear was her own heartbeat and the rain hammering against the windows. Guillaume backed up a step, then another. "You're lying. Halmon's son was some nobody, a dock worker. He disappeared years ago." "I evolved," Yang Di said simply. "Found a different way to protect the things I cared about. Turned out I was very good at it." He gestured to the men in suits positioned around the dining room. "Good enough that people started calling me Iron Dragon. Good enough that when I decided to come back and reclaim what my mother built, I could do it with patience instead of rage." His phone buzzed, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Yang Di picked it up, glanced at the screen, and his smile returned, wider now, more dangerous. "They're here," he said. "Who's here?" Guillaume's voice cracked. "What did you do?" "I texted my lawyers, my accountants, my health inspectors." Yang Di counted off on his fingers. "And a few friends in immigration who are very interested in how you've been threatening foreign workers with deportation if they don't participate in fraud." Through the windows, more headlights appeared. Not just sedans this time. Vans, official vehicles with government plates. People in suits and uniforms emerging into the rain, moving toward the restaurant entrance with the organized efficiency of an invasion force. "This is insane," Guillaume sputtered. "You can't just, you're a criminal. Everyone knows what you are. The police won't believe a word you say." "You're right," Yang Di agreed. "I am a criminal, but I'm a very rich criminal with very expensive lawyers and connections that run deeper than you can imagine. And more importantly," he picked up the poisoned burrito, holding it like evidence, "I'm a criminal who was nearly murdered in his own mother's stolen restaurant by a second-generation mediocrity who thinks cruelty makes him powerful." He turned to Tracy. "Did you touch this plate before bringing it to me?" "Yes," she whispered, "when I picked it up from the kitchen." "Good, your fingerprints are on it. So are Guillaume's, so are the sous chefs. Perfect chain of custody." Yang Di set the plate down carefully. "This isn't just evidence of attempted poisoning. It's evidence of conspiracy, workplace coercion, criminal negligence. Everything I need to dismantle this place brick by brick." Guillaume was shaking now, actually shaking. The bottle of degreaser slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a hollow plastic thunk. Clear liquid spread across the marble like blood. "I'll tell them you set me up," Guillaume said desperately. "That you planted the poison. That this whole thing was staged to steal my restaurant." "Your restaurant?" Yang Di's voice went cold. "Say that again, and I'll have my men remove your tongue before the police arrive." The suited man nearest the door took a step forward. Just one, but the threat was clear. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about knowing my place," Yang Di continued. "About respecting establishments that are above my social class. But you made 2 mistakes, Guillaume. The first was forgetting that tattoos don't determine worth. They just tell stories you're too ignorant to read." "And the second mistake?" Tracy asked. She couldn't help it. The question fell out of her mouth like a stone dropping into still water. Yang Di looked at her, really looked at her. and for the first time since this nightmare began, she saw something almost like warmth in his eyes. "The second mistake," he said quietly, "was assuming that everyone in this restaurant was as morally bankrupt as he is. He thought you'd deliver the poison without question because survival always wins over conscience. He didn't account for the fact that some people still believe in mercy, even when it costs them everything." The front door opened. Police entered first, followed by health inspectors in white coats. A woman in an expensive suit who had lawyer written all over her strode straight to Yang Di, handing him a folder without saying a word. "Building deed," Yang Di said, flipping it open. "Transferred back to the rightful owner. That would be me, inheritor of Halmoni's estate, signed by a judge 20 minutes ago." He looked at Guillaume. "You're trespassing on my property after attempting to murder me, in front of witnesses, with physical evidence." Guillaume's knees buckled. He caught himself on a chair, but barely. "Take him," Yang Di said to the police, not loudly. He didn't need to be loud. Authority didn't require volume. 2 officers moved forward, pulling handcuffs from their belts. Guillaume didn't resist. He couldn't. All the fight had drained out of him the moment he realized he wasn't dealing with a random vagrant but something far more dangerous. A man with resources, patience, and a very long memory for injustice. As they led Guillaume away, he looked back at Tracy. "This is your fault," he hissed. "You could have kept your mouth shut, could have just served the food, but you had to play hero." "No," Tracy said quietly. "I just had to be human. You should try it sometime." Guillaume was still screaming obscenities as they pulled him through the door and into the rain. The other diners were frozen, their expensive meals forgotten. Sarah had emerged from the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Junho stood in the doorway, looking like he'd just been pardoned from execution. Yang Di turned to address the room. "Maison Lumiere is closed, permanently. If you've been mistreated here, talk to the lawyers outside. If you've witnessed health violations, talk to the inspectors. If you just want to leave, the exits are open." People scrambled, grabbing coats, abandoning half-finished bottles of wine. Within 2 minutes, the dining room was empty except for Tracy, Yang Di, his suited men, and the officials cataloging evidence. "You're free to go too," Yang Di said to Tracy, "unless you have questions." Tracy had 1,000 questions, but only one mattered. What happens to the people who work here? Sarah, Junho, Minseo. They didn't do anything wrong. They were just trying to survive. They'll be compensated for unpaid wages, given references, helped with job placement. Yang Di pulled out another business card, identical to the first. "Or they can call this number and work for me. I'm opening a new restaurant, same location, different management. I'm going to need people I can trust." He handed her the card. Their fingers touched again. This time, he held on for a second longer. "Why me?" Tracy asked. "You don't know anything about me except that I wrote 3 words on a napkin." "Those 3 words told me everything I needed to know," Yang Di replied. "You chose conscience over cash, mercy over safety. That's rarer than you think, especially in this city." His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, frowned slightly, then looked back at her. "Go home, Tracy Rogers. Sleep. Tomorrow morning, call the number on that card. We'll talk about your brother's legal fees, about your visa, about whether you want to work in a restaurant that actually values human dignity." "I can't afford to owe you," Tracy said. "Whatever you're offering, there's a price. There's always a price." "You're right." Yang Di's smile was sad now, weighted with something that looked almost like regret. "There is a price, but sometimes the person paying it isn't the person receiving the help." He walked away before she could ask what that meant, moving toward the police to give his statement. The suited men followed like shadows. The restaurant that had been her prison for 8 months was now a crime scene, yellow tape going up, cameras flashing, evidence bags being filled with poisoned food and falsified documents. Tracy stood alone in the wreckage, clutching a business card and wondering how a single napkin note had transformed from a desperate warning into a declaration of war, and why the most dangerous man in Seoul was smiling like he'd just won a game she didn't even know they were playing. The black sedans arrived in formation. 3 of them sleek and expensive, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights hunting prey. They didn't park so much as position themselves. Strategic, blocking exits, controlling sight lines, the kind of deployment that came from military training or organized crime. In Seoul's underworld, the distinction was academic. Tracy watched through the rain-streaked windows as men emerged from the vehicles. 6 of them, all wearing identical dark suits that fit too well to be rentals. They moved with synchronized precision, spreading out to cover the restaurant's perimeter. 1 stood at the main entrance. 2 flanked the side doors. The others positioned themselves with clear views of the interior. This wasn't a dinner reservation. This was a siege. Inside Maison Lumiere, the atmosphere had calcified into something brittle and dangerous. The socialites had stopped pretending to eat. The businessman was halfway to the door, his coat clutched in white-knuckled hands. Min Seo had abandoned the hostess stand entirely, probably locked in the bathroom. Sarah stood frozen near the bar, her tray of wine glasses tilting at an angle that would send everything crashing to the floor if her hands shook any harder. And Guillaume. Guillaume stood in the center of the dining room holding that bottle of industrial degreaser like it was a talisman that could protect him from what was coming. But his face told a different story. He knew these men, knew what they represented, knew that the tattooed vagrant he'd tried to humiliate wasn't a victim, but a king traveling in disguise. Yang Di sat perfectly still in booth 7, his phone face down on the table, waiting. The smile had faded from his face, replaced by something colder, more focused. This was the expression of a man watching chess pieces move into position, confirming calculations he'd made hours or days or months ago. The front door opened. Rain and cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and urban decay. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Tracy's entire wardrobe. His face was angular, carved from stone, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. The kind of scar that came from a knife fight where both participants walked away, but only one kept all their original parts. He scanned the restaurant with the cold efficiency of a security system logging threats. His gaze passed over the cowering diners, the terrified staff, Guillaume's trembling form. Then it landed on Yang Di. And he bowed. Not a polite greeting, a full formal bow, 90 degrees, the kind reserved for superiors, for bosses, for the man whose word determined whether you saw tomorrow's sunrise. Hyungnim, the man said in Korean, big brother, the term of respect used in organized crime for those who commanded absolute loyalty. We came as soon as you called. Yang Di stood slowly. The hoodie that had made him look like a street vagrant now seemed like camouflage being shed. He pulled back the hood, revealing his face fully for the first time. Sharp features, dark eyes that held calculations running too deep for civilians to fathom. And those tattoos. The dragons coiled up his neck, their scales catching the amber light, seeming to breathe with each movement. Di-ho, Yang Di said. His voice had changed. Still quiet, but with an edge of command that made the temperature drop another degree. Status. Is this a rescue or a hit? Perimeter secured, Di-ho replied, straightening from his bow. No one enters or leaves without your permission. We have the building's ownership documents ready for transfer. Legal team is 3 minutes out. Police are 8 minutes behind them. He paused, his scarred face hardening. Do you need us to extract you? No. Yang Di's eyes found Guillaume. I need you to bear witness. Tracy felt her stomach drop. Witness to what? An execution, a beating, the kind of street justice that left people broken in alleyways. How will Tracy survive the crossfire? She was trapped between the booth and the bar, too visible to hide, too involved to claim ignorance. The note was still in Yang Di's pocket, her handwriting, her warning, evidence that she'd chosen a side in a war she hadn't known existed until 5 minutes ago. Di-ho's gaze swept the room again, this time more carefully, cataloging details. When his eyes landed on Tracy, they narrowed slightly. The waitress, she's the one who... She saved my life, Yang Di interrupted. Twice, once with discretion, once with courage, she's under my protection now. The words landed like a decree. Di-ho nodded once, accepting the proclamation without question. But his expression suggested he was already calculating what protection would cost, what obligations came with it, what debts would need to be repaid. Guillaume finally found his voice. It came out strangled, desperate. "This is insane. You can't just storm in here with your thugs and—" "My executives," Yang Di corrected mildly. "Di-ho runs my logistics division. Very efficient, very thorough. He once tracked down a man who stole from me using nothing but a partial license plate and a grainy security photo. Found him in Busan within 18 hours. He paused. "Would you like to know what happened after that?" Guillaume's mouth snapped shut. Yang Di walked toward him with measured steps. Each footfall echoed in the silent restaurant. "You tried to poison me in my mother's restaurant, the building she died trying to protect." His voice was conversational, almost friendly, which made it more terrifying than shouting would have been. "Do you understand what you've done, the precedent this sets?" "It was a prank," Guillaume stammered. "A joke. I didn't know who you were if I'd known." "If you'd known, you would have bowed and scraped and served me your finest meal." Yang Di stopped inches from Guillaume. "But you didn't know, because you judge people by their appearance, their skin, their tattoos. You saw someone you thought was beneath you and decided to teach them a lesson in humiliation." "I'm sorry. I'll apologize, compensate you, whatever you want." "What I want," Yang Di said softly, "is for you to understand that cruelty always finds its way back home. You humiliated people because it made you feel powerful, poisoned them because you thought you were untouchable, threatened them because you confused fear with respect." He reached out and plucked the degreaser bottle from Guillaume's trembling hands, held it up to the light. The clear liquid sloshed inside, catching the amber glow. "How much did you put in my food?" Yang Di asked. "A tablespoon, maybe 2. I swear it wasn't enough to kill you." "Just enough to hospitalize, to humiliate, to remind me of my place." Yang Di nodded slowly. "Poetic, cruel, exactly the kind of punishment a small man would devise." He turned to Di-ho. "Is the sous chef still in the kitchen?" "Yes, Hunam. Should I bring him out?" "Please." Di-ho moved with frightening speed for someone his size. Within seconds, he returned with Junho, who looked like he was walking to his own execution. The young chef's eyes were red. His hands shook. When he saw Yang Di holding the degreaser bottle, his knees nearly buckled. "Tell me what happened," Yang Di said to him. "The truth. I already know the facts. I want to hear your version." Junho swallowed hard. "Guillaume ordered me to mix the degreaser into the burrito sauce. I refused. He said if I didn't comply, he'd make sure my mother's cancer treatments got delayed. She's on a waiting list for an experimental program. He has connections at the hospital. He could." His voice cracked. "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Yang Di said, but his tone wasn't accusatory, just tired. "You chose your mother's life over a stranger's safety. I don't fault you for that. Family comes first. It's what separates us from animals." He handed the bottle back to Guillaume. "Drink it." The room went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. "What?" Guillaume's voice was barely a whisper. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about knowing my place. Now I'm teaching you one. Drink what you tried to feed me. Let's see how humiliation tastes when it's yours to swallow." "I won't. You can't make me." Yang Di smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had stopped pretending to be something else. "Di-ho." The scarred man stepped forward. Didn't touch Guillaume. Didn't need to. His presence was threat enough. "You have 2 choices," Yang Di said calmly. "Drink what you tried to poison me with, or I let Di-ho demonstrate what happens to people who try to kill the Iron Dragon. One is painful but survivable. The other is a story that will circulate in Seoul's underworld for the next decade as a cautionary tale." Guillaume was crying now, actual tears streaming down his face. "Please, I have a family, a father who—" "Your father is the reason my mother lost everything," Yang Di interrupted. "Predatory loans, forged documents, legal theft dressed in expensive suits. You want to invoke family? Fine. Let's talk about how your family built their fortune on the corpses of people like my mother." The businessman who'd been inching toward the exit suddenly bolted. Diho moved like water, intercepting him before he'd taken 3 steps. "Sit down," Diho said quietly. "Hunim hasn't dismissed anyone yet." The businessman sat, hard. His face had gone the color of spoiled milk. Tracy's mind was racing. She needed to leave, needed to run, needed to be anywhere but here when whatever was about to happen happened. But her feet wouldn't move. She was frozen, a witness to something that felt like justice and revenge having a knife fight in the dark. "Last chance," Yang Di said to Guillaume. "Drink, or I make a different call." Guillaume uncapped the bottle with shaking hands. The chemical smell hit immediately. Sharp, caustic, the smell of something that dissolved organic matter with efficient brutality. He lifted it to his lips. "Stop," Tracy said. The word escaped before her brain could veto it. "Don't make him do this." Every eye in the restaurant turned to her. Yang Di's expression was unreadable. "Why not? He was willing to do it to me." "Because you're better than him," Tracy said. Her voice was shaking, but she forced the words out anyway. "Because forcing someone to poison themselves makes you exactly what he accused you of being. A thug, a criminal, someone who solves problems with violence." "I am a criminal," Yang Di said. "I've never pretended otherwise." "Then prove you're more than that. Prove that mercy isn't just something weak people practice because they lack the power for revenge." The silence stretched. Yang Di stared at her like he was seeing something unexpected, something that didn't fit his calculations. Then he plucked the bottle from Guillaume's hands. "You're right. Making him drink this would be mercy compared to what he deserves, which is exactly why I'm not going to do it." He handed the bottle to Diho. "Evidence, chain of custody, make sure the police get this intact." Diho accepted it with a nod, sealing it in a plastic bag one of his men provided. The restaurant exhaled. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted, became something less immediately lethal. Diho approached Yang Di, speaking low enough that Tracy had to strain to hear. "The legal team is here. Health inspectors 3 minutes behind. Do you want us to clear the civilians?" "Let them leave voluntarily. No one is a prisoner here." The diners didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed coats and purses and fled into the night like refugees escaping a war zone. Within 90 seconds, the dining room was empty except for staff and syndicate. Tracy remained where she was, partly because her legs wouldn't support movement, partly because she needed answers. "What happens now?" Yang Di turned to her. The cold mask had cracked slightly. Underneath was something that looked almost human. "Now you go home. Tomorrow morning you call the number I gave you. We'll discuss your future." "I don't want to be in debt to the Mafia," Tracy said. "I don't want protection that comes with obligations I can't repay." "Then don't think of it as debt," Yang Di replied. "Think of it as payment for services rendered. You saved my life. That has value. In my world, debts of blood are the only currency that matters." "What kind of services?" "The kind that require someone I can trust. Someone who chooses conscience over convenience. Someone who proved tonight that they're willing to stand between a monster and their prey, even when it costs them everything." He walked past her toward the kitchen. Diho followed. The other suited men maintained their positions. Professional, disciplined, waiting for orders that would determine whether this night ended in paperwork or body bags. Tracy stood alone in the dining room that had been her prison, watching the Iron Dragon reclaim his mother's stolen throne, and wondering if she'd just been rescued or recruited into something far more dangerous than Guillaume's petty cruelty. Because at least with Guillaume, the evil was small and comprehensible. But with Yang Di, she'd just witnessed mercy wrapped in threat, justice delivered through intimidation, and a man who commanded an army asking her opinion before executing his enemy. Which meant she hadn't just survived the crossfire, she'd somehow become part of the artillery. The kitchen at Maison Lumiere smelled like every kitchen Tracy had ever worked in. Garlic and rendered fat, bleach and desperation. The ghost of 1,000 meals prepared by people who'd never tasted them, but tonight it smelled like something else too. Fear, sharp and acrid, cutting through the industrial ventilation like smoke from a grease fire. Guillaume stood in the center of the prep area, flanked by two of Diho's men. He wasn't handcuffed. Didn't need to be. Where would he run? The exits were covered. The street outside was controlled territory, and even if he made it past the suited enforcers, he'd just be running into the rain with nowhere to go and a target painted on his back by his own stupidity. Yang Di entered the kitchen like he owned it. Because he did. The deed transfer had gone through 17 minutes ago, according to the lawyer who'd arrived with a folder full of documents and a smile that suggested she'd orchestrated hostile takeovers before breakfast more challenging than this one. Tracy followed at a distance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She should have left. Should have walked out into the rain and never looked back. But something kept her rooted. Partly curiosity. Partly the sick fascination of watching a man who terrorized her for 8 months finally face consequences. And partly because Yang Di had looked at her before entering the kitchen, a silent question in his eyes. Are you coming? So she came. Junho stood near the industrial sink, scrubbing his hands raw even though they were already clean. Sarah had fled entirely, probably halfway home by now. Min Seo was locked in the staff bathroom, her muffled crying audible through the door. The kitchen had become a courtroom, or an execution chamber. The distinction would be determined in the next few minutes. Bring the plate, Yang Di said. One of Diho's men retrieved the poisoned burrito from the dining room. It sat on its white ceramic throne, the sauce congealing into something that looked organic but wrong, like flesh that had started to rot from the inside. The man set it on the stainless steel prep counter, directly in front of Guillaume. Here's what's going to happen, Yang Di said conversationally. He pulled up a stool and sat, completely relaxed, like he was settling in to watch a cooking demonstration. You're going to eat what you prepared for me, every bite, every drop of sauce, and you're going to experience exactly what you wanted me to experience. Humiliation, pain, the understanding that you are powerless. Guillaume's face had gone gray. That will kill me. No, it won't. You measured carefully, remember? 1 tablespoon, maybe 2, just enough to cause severe gastric distress, your words. Yang Di picked up a fork from the magnetic knife strip, tested its weight, set it down in front of Guillaume. Eat. I won't. Then we moved to Plan B. Yang Di glanced at Diho. Show him Plan B. Diho pulled out his phone, pulled up a photo, turned the screen toward Guillaume. Tracy couldn't see what it showed, but Guillaume's reaction told her everything. His knees buckled. One of the suited men caught him before he hit the floor. That's your father's country house in Yongpyong, Yang Di explained. Beautiful property, very isolated. We have people there right now, not doing anything, just watching, waiting for my call. You wouldn't, Guillaume's voice cracked. He's an old man, he has nothing to do with this. He has everything to do with this. He stole my mother's restaurant, forged her signature on predatory loan documents, bankrupted her through legal theft. She died 3 weeks after losing this building. Stress-induced cardiac arrest. The coroner said her heart just gave up. Yang Di's voice remained calm, detached, which made the words cut deeper. So yes, Guillaume, your father has everything to do with this. And if you don't eat what you tried to feed me, I'm going to make a phone call that ensures his retirement becomes very uncomfortable. Does a bully deserve mercy? Tracy watched Guillaume's face cycle through emotions. Rage, terror, denial, bargaining. This was what power looked like when it stopped pretending to be civilized. Raw, transactional, a ledger of pain where debts were paid in suffering. You can't make me, Guillaume whispered. But the conviction was gone. He was stalling, hopping for rescue that wouldn't come. I can't physically force you to open your mouth and swallow, Yang Di agreed. But I can make every alternative so much worse that eating becomes the merciful option. That's leadership, Guillaume. Making people choose their own punishment because the alternative is unthinkable. He stood, walked to the prep counter, picked up the plate, held it out to Guillaume like an offering. Last chance. Eat willingly and your father stays safe. Your family's business remains intact. You walk out of here with nothing but a hospital bill and a lesson learned. Refuse and I systematize your destruction. Financial audits, health inspections, immigration investigations. By this time next month, the Beaumont name will be synonymous with fraud. Guillaume took the plate with shaking hands, stared at the burrito like it was a coiled snake. How many bites? All of it. That's insane. The degreaser will do exactly what you intended it to do to me. Cause pain, humiliation, a trip to the emergency room where you'll have to explain to doctors how you ingested industrial cleaner. Yang Di smiled. Poetic, don't you think? The neon lights of the present faded into the steam of the past. Tracy was 7 years old, standing in the school cafeteria. Devon was 5, small for his age, sitting alone at a table in the corner. A group of older boys surrounded him, not touching, just laughing, pointing at the holes in his shoes, at the hand-me-down jacket that was too big, at everything that marked him as poor in a school full of kids whose parents could afford new things. Tell him to stop wearing trash, the ringleader said. He makes the whole cafeteria smell like poverty. Young Tracy walked over. Her hands were balled into fists. Leave him alone. Or what? You gonna cry about it? She didn't cry. She picked up her lunch tray, mac and cheese, apple slices, chocolate milk, and dumped it on the ringleader's head. The cafeteria went silent. The boy stood there, cheese dripping down his face, too shocked to react. Now you smell like poverty too, young Tracy said. How does it feel? She got suspended for 3 days. Devon got left alone for the rest of the year, and Tracy learned that sometimes justice required getting your hands dirty. But this wasn't mac and cheese. This was poison. The sharp crack of ceramic against steel snapped her back to the cold reality. Guillaume had set the plate down hard enough to chip it. I won't do it. You're bluffing about my father. You're bluffing about all of it. You're just a thug with expensive tattoos who... Yang Di pulled out his phone, dialed a number, put it on speaker. It rang twice before a voice answered. Male, older, speaking Korean with the refined accent of Seoul's old money elite. Yes. Mr. Beaumont, Yang Di said politely. This is Yang Di. We've never met formally, but I believe you knew my mother, Mrs. Yang. She owned Halmoni's kitchen before you acquired the property. Silence on the other end. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Plausible deniability. Very wise. Yang Di's tone remained pleasant. I'm calling because your son tried to poison me tonight. Industrial degreaser mixed into food. Attempted murder in the building you stole from my family. I thought you should know before the police arrive. More silence. Then, my son would never. Your son is standing in front of me right now, crying like a child who just realized his actions have consequences. I'm offering him a choice. Eat what he tried to feed me, or I dismantle everything you've built over the past 20 years. I have lawyers, investigators, friends in every regulatory agency that matters. By the time I'm done, the Beaumont family will be a cautionary tale. This is extortion. This is justice, Yang Di corrected. Delayed but not denied. You have 30 seconds to tell your son to comply, or I make the call that starts the audit process. The phone crackled. Then the elder Beaumont's voice, colder now. Guillaume, do what he says. Father, he's trying to. Do what he says. Each word was a hammer blow. You've embarrassed this family enough. Fix it now. The line went dead. Guillaume stared at the phone like it was a death sentence, which it was. His own father had just sold him out, chosen the family's reputation over his son's safety, the same way Guillaume had chosen his ego over basic human decency for months. He picked up the fork, cut into the burrito. The sauce oozed out, too thin, too shiny, chemical residue catching the overhead lights. Can Tracy stop a Mafia execution? Wait, Tracy heard herself say. The word came from somewhere outside her conscious control, from the part of her that had dumped mac and cheese on a bully's head, from the part that had slipped a warning note to a stranger, from the part that believed mercy mattered even when the recipient didn't deserve it. Yang Di turned to her. We discussed this already. I know, but I need to say it again. Tracy stepped forward, positioning herself between Guillaume and his poisoned creation. Making him eat this doesn't prove you're better than him. It proves you're the same, just with more power. He tried to kill me. And you stopped him. You won. You took his restaurant. his reputation, his future. Making him suffer physically on top of that is just sadism with better justification. Yang Di's expression was unreadable. He wouldn't have shown you mercy. He threatened to deport you, destroy your brother's case, ruin your life because you hesitated to poison a stranger. I know, Tracy's voice was steady now, certain. That's why I'm better than him, because I'm choosing mercy even when he doesn't deserve it. And if you make him eat that, you're telling me that everything you said about debts of blood and honor and trust was a performance. That underneath the philosophy, you're just another man who solves problems by making people hurt. The kitchen went silent. Di-ho watched his boss carefully, hand resting on something concealed beneath his jacket. The suited men waited for orders. Junho had stopped scrubbing his hands and was staring at Tracy like she'd just stepped between a tiger and its prey. You're protecting him, Yang Di said slowly. After everything he did to you, after months of abuse, you're standing here defending the man who threatened your family. I'm not protecting him, I'm protecting you. Tracy met his eyes. Because the man who sat in that booth and thanked me for a warning note is someone worth knowing. But the man who forces someone to eat poison, that's someone I don't want to owe a debt to. That's someone who will collect payment in pieces of my soul until there's nothing left. Yang Di studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked at Guillaume. You understand how close you came to dying tonight? Guillaume nodded, unable to speak. You understand that the only reason you're walking out of here is because this woman, who you terrorized for months, decided your life was worth saving. Another nod. Then kneel. Guillaume's eyes went wide. What? Kneel in front of her and thank her for the mercy I was not going to give you. Guillaume's pride warred with his survival instinct. Survival won. He dropped to his knees on the kitchen tile, looked up at Tracy with something that might have been genuine shame, and whispered, Thank you. Louder, Yang Di commanded. Thank you for saving my life. Yang Di gestured to his men. Get him out of here. Drop him at the nearest hospital. Tell them he accidentally ingested cleaning product. Let the doctors ask questions he can't answer. The suited men hauled Guillaume to his feet and escorted him toward the exit. He looked back once, meeting Tracy's eyes. There was no gratitude there, no redemption, just the cold calculation of a man figuring out how to spin this story into something less humiliating. Some people didn't learn. They just learned to hide better. When they were gone, Yang Di turned to Tracy. You stopped me from doing something I would have enjoyed, something he deserved, something that would have sent a message to everyone who thinks they can disrespect what I'm building here. I know. Do you understand what that cost? The precedent it sets? People will think I'm going soft. That protection from the Iron Dragon means nothing. Or they'll think you're evolving, Tracy said quietly. That you're building something better than fear, something that lasts longer than intimidation. Yang Di laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. You have no idea how this world works. Mercy is weakness. Compassion is a liability. The only reason I'm standing here instead of buried in an unmarked grave is because I learned to be harder than everyone trying to kill me. Maybe, Tracy's hands had stopped shaking. Or maybe the reason you're standing here is because somewhere inside, you still remember what your mother taught you. Protection that comes from fear is just another kind of prison. Yang Di went very still. How do you know? I don't, but I recognize the look of someone fighting with their better angels. You could have made him eat that poison, but you let me stop you. Not because I'm physically capable of stopping you, but because part of you wanted to be stopped. Di-ho cleared his throat. Hyungnam, the police are here, health inspectors, lawyers, they need statements. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. Yang Di didn't look away from Tracy. You're either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which. Can I be both? Not if you want to survive in my world. Then maybe I don't want to survive in your world, Tracy said. Maybe I want to help you build a different one. The words hung in the air between them. Outside, sirens wailed. Official vehicles arrived with flashing lights. The machinery of law enforcement beginning its slow grind through evidence and testimony. Yang Di reached into his pocket, pulled out the note she'd written. Don't eat, It's poison. The ink had bled completely now, the words barely legible, but he held it like it was sacred text. You wrote this when you thought I was just a vagrant, someone you'd never see again, someone who couldn't repay you or protect you or offer you anything but gratitude. Yes. And tonight you defended a man who tried to destroy you, knowing it might cost you my protection, my resources, everything I offered. Yes. Why? Tracy thought about Devon, about her mother who died when they were young, about every choice that had led her to a Seoul kitchen at midnight, standing between a Mafia boss and his revenge. Because someone has to believe that people can be better than their worst impulses, she said finally. Even if it's naive, even if it's dangerous, someone has to try. Yang Di folded the note carefully, put it back in his pocket. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., call the number on the card. We're going to have a very long conversation about what you think I'm capable of becoming. He walked toward the door, paused. And Tracy, don't mistake my mercy tonight for weakness. Guillaume lives because you asked. But the next person who tries to harm what's mine won't get a second chance. Not from me, not from anyone. Then he was gone, leaving Tracy alone in a kitchen that smelled like bleach and second chances, wondering if she just saved a soul or made a deal with something that wore redemption like a mask, and whether there was any difference in a world where mercy was measured in the distance between a poisoned burrito and a man walking free into the Seoul rain. The storage room at Maison Lumiere existed in a permanent state of neglect. Boxes of expired ingredients stacked against water-stained walls. Broken chairs missing legs. The skeletal remains of commercial equipment too damaged to repair but too expensive to throw away. It smelled like mildew and forgotten things, the graveyard where Guillaume's ambition came to rot. Yang Di stood in the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. He'd sent everyone else away. The police were cataloging evidence in the dining room. The health inspectors were photographing violations in the kitchen. Di-ho was coordinating with lawyers in the office. This moment was private, sacred, the kind of reckoning that required solitude. You don't have to come, he said without turning around. Tracy stood behind him, uncertain. After Guillaume's escorted exit and the sermon she delivered about mercy, she'd expected dismissal. Expected Yang Di to send her home with instructions to call tomorrow and never mention tonight again. Instead, he'd asked her to follow him to the back of the restaurant, to this forgotten room where the past lived in cardboard boxes and rust. I want to understand, she said. Understand what? Why a man who runs half of Seoul's underworld cares about a restaurant. Why you spent months planning an operation this elaborate just to reclaim a building. Yang Di stepped into the storage room, pulled a string hanging from the ceiling. A single bulb flickered to life, casting harsh shadows across decades of accumulated debris. Because some thefts aren't about money, they're about erasing people. He began moving boxes, shoving them aside with the focused intensity of someone searching for something specific. Dust rose in clouds. Tracy could hear him muttering in Korean, counting, calculating distances from walls. It should be here, he said. They wouldn't have thrown it out. Too heavy, too old, not worth the effort. What are we looking for? A pot, cast iron, older than I am. He shoved aside a broken refrigerator shelf. My mother used it to make gomtang, beef bone broth. She'd simmer it for 18 hours until the marrow dissolved and the broth turned milky white. People came from across the city just to taste it. Tracy knelt, helping him search. She didn't know what cast iron looked like after 20 years of abandonment, but she could recognize importance in his voice. What happened to the restaurant? Guillaume's father happened. Yang Di pulled out a box of warped cutting boards, examined them, discarded them. My mother opened Halmoni's kitchen when I was 8. She'd saved for 15 years working in other people's restaurants, living in a room so small you could touch both walls with your arms spread. But she had a dream, her own place, her own menu, respect. He paused, staring at a cracked ceramic bowl. She got 10 years. 10 years of success before the Beaumonts decided this location was worth more as a fusion restaurant than a humble noodle shop. What was stolen can be reclaimed. They offered to buy her out, Yang Di continued. Fair price, professional transaction, she refused. This was her life's work, not for sale, so they changed tactics. Predatory loans from a bank the elder Beaumont controlled. Contracts in French she couldn't read. Forged signatures on documents that transferred the deed. His hands stilled on a box marked Kitchen Equipment Archive. He opened it slowly, like approaching a religious artifact. Inside, nested in old newspapers, was a pot, massive, black as midnight, the handle worn smooth from decades of use, the bottom scorched and stained from countless hours over flame. Yang Di lifted it out with both hands. The weight made his arms strain, but his expression was reverent. He ran his fingers along the rim, tracing invisible memories. The neon lights of the present faded into the steam of the past. The restaurant was smaller then. 6 tables, a bar with 8 stools, walls painted yellow because his mother believed bright colors made people hungry. The kitchen was visible from the dining room, separated only by a low counter where customers could watch their food being prepared. Young Di sat on a stool, swinging his legs, watching his mother work. She moved with practiced efficiency, chopping vegetables, adjusting heat, tasting broth with a wooden spoon worn thin from use. The cast iron pot dominated the stove, bubbling with beef bones that had been simmering since before dawn. "Di-ya," she said without looking up. "Stop watching me and finish your homework." "I already finished." "Then read ahead. Education is the only thing they can't steal from you." "Who's they?" His mother paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "People who think they own the world because they have money. People who forget that everyone starts in the same place, naked and hungry, and hopping someone will be kind." A customer entered, businessman in an expensive suit. He looked around the small restaurant with barely concealed disdain. "I'm meeting someone. Beaumont. Has he arrived?" "Not yet," his mother said politely. "Please sit anywhere. Can I get you tea while you wait?" The man sat at the corner table, pulling out his phone. 10 minutes later, another man entered, older, silver hair, wearing a suit that cost more than the restaurant's monthly revenue. He had Guillaume's face, but refined by age and cruelty into something harder. "Mr. Beaumont," the first man said, standing to bow. The elder Beaumont ignored him, walking to the counter instead. He watched young Di's mother work with the clinical interest of someone evaluating property. "This location," he said in Korean. "How long have you operated here?" 7 years, she replied, not looking up from her cutting board. "Lease or own?" "Own. I bought the building." "Interesting." Beaumont pulled out a business card, set it on the counter. "I'm prepared to make you an offer, very generous, enough to retire comfortably." "Thank you, but no. This is my life's work." "Everything is for sale, Mrs. Yang. It's just a matter of price." "Not this." She finally looked at him. "You can go now. Your meeting is at the table, not at my counter." Beaumont's smile was thin, dangerous. "We'll speak again when you're more reasonable." He walked away. Young Di watched his mother's hands shake as she returned to chopping vegetables. Just slightly. Just enough to notice if you were paying attention. "Iyama," he said quietly. "Who was that man?" "Nobody important," but her voice said otherwise. 3 months later, the foreclosure notice arrived. 6 months after that, the building belonged to the Beaumonts. And 3 weeks after losing everything, his mother collapsed in their tiny apartment from a heart attack that the doctors said was caused by stress and heartbreak. Young Di stood in the hospital hallway, holding the cast iron pot she'd asked him to retrieve from the restaurant's storage. The pot that was too heavy to move during the rushed eviction. The pot that represented every dream she'd built and lost. "Promise me," she whispered from her hospital bed, her hand cold in his. "Promise me you won't become what hurt us. Don't let anger make you cruel." Young Di promised. And then he broke that promise in every way possible except one. He never forgot whose cruelty had killed her. The sharp crack of Tracy's voice snapped him back to the cold reality. "That's it, isn't it?" she said. "That's why you came tonight. Not just for revenge for this pot, for proof that she existed, that what she built mattered. Yang Di set the pot down carefully on an overturned crate. Guillaume tried to poison me with a burrito, fusion cuisine, the kind of food that pretends to honor tradition while bastardizing it for profit. But my mother made gomtang, simple, honest, food that remembered where it came from. Is this about a burrito or a birthright? Both, Tracy said quietly. It's always both, the immediate insult and the deeper wound underneath. Yang Di nodded. Guillaume thought he was teaching me a lesson about class, about knowing my place. He had no idea he was serving poison to the son of the woman whose kitchen his father stole. No idea that the hoodlum in the booth was the child who used to sit on that stool watching his mother cook, learning that respect isn't given by people in expensive suits, but earned through honest work. He picked up the pot again, cradling it like a child. I'm going to rebuild this place, not as Maison Lumiere, as Halmoni's kitchen, same name, same recipes, different owner but the same heart. And me, Tracy asked, where do I fit in this resurrection? That depends. Yang Di turned to face her fully. Can you learn to make gomtang? Can you honor food that doesn't pretend to be more than it is? Can you work in a restaurant where the owner is a criminal trying very hard not to let that define everything he touches? Tracy thought about her own mother, who died too young. About Devon, sitting in a cell. About every choice that had led her to this storage room, standing across from a man holding his mother's pot like it was a holy relic. I can learn, she said, but I need something first. Name it. Help with my brother's case. Real help. Not intimidation or favors that come with strings. Actual legal support that gets him out cleanly. Yang Di smiled. Already done. I made a call while the police were processing Guillaume, best defense attorney in Seoul. She specializes in wrongful prosecution. Your brother will be out within a week. And the cost? You already paid it, with a napkin note and more mercy than I deserved. He walked toward the door, still carrying the pot. 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll talk about salaries, schedules, and whether you're ready to work for someone whose protection comes with complications. Tracy followed him out of the storage room, leaving behind the boxes and broken furniture and all the ghosts of Guillaume's failed ambition, understanding finally that tonight had never been about a poisoned burrito or even revenge, but about a son reclaiming his mother's dream, one cast iron pot at a time, and whether a stranger from Virginia could help him cook something honest in a city built on beautiful lies. The law office of Kim and Associates occupied the 43rd floor of a glass tower in Gangnam that reflected the city like a mirror examining its own corruption. Tracy had never been in a building this expensive. The elevator required a key card just to access the upper floors. The reception area had furniture that cost more than her yearly salary. Even the air smelled different up here. Filtered, sanitized. The kind of atmosphere where poor people's problems were translated into billable hours and filed away in leather folders. She received the text at 6 a.m., 3 hours before she was supposed to call Yang Di's number. Come to this address, 8th floor conference room. Your brother's lawyer is waiting. No signature, no explanation, just an address and an assumption that she'd comply. Now she sat in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, watching the city wake up in layers of neon and exhaust. A woman in a tailored suit sat across from her, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon planning an operation. Attorney Kim Min-young was 45 and had the kind of reputation that made prosecutors nervous. She'd built her career defending the indefensible and winning. White-collar criminals, corrupt politicians, chaebols accused of embezzlement. The guilty paid her to make juries question reality itself. Your brother's case, she said without preamble, sliding a folder across the polished table, is a masterclass in prosecutorial incompetence wrapped in racial bias. I've read the police reports, the witness statements, the surveillance footage they claim doesn't exist, but actually does because I have contacts who know where to look. Tracy opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Devon sitting in an interrogation room, his face swollen. medical reports documenting injuries sustained during arrest, witness statements in Korean with English translations paper-clipped to each page. The prosecutor's narrative is that your brother started a fight outside a Hongdae bar, Kim continued. Assaulted a Korean national without provocation, resisted arrest, except the surveillance footage tells a different story. She pulled out her laptop, turned it to face Tracy, and pressed play. The video was grainy, shot from a security camera mounted above a bar entrance. Tracy watched as a Korean man, early 20s, grabbed a young woman's wrist. She tried to pull away. He tightened his grip, yanking her toward an alley. The woman was screaming, her voice silent on the footage but her terror visible. Then Devon appeared, tall, athletic, moving with the protective instinct of someone who'd grown up shielding his sister from bullies. He put himself between the man and the woman, said something. The man shoved him. Devon shoved back. The man threw a punch. Devon blocked it and countered with a strike that dropped the assailant to the ground. Self-defense, textbook, justified. Then the police arrived. 4 officers. They ignored the woman trying to explain, ignored the man on the ground who'd initiated the assault. They went straight for Devon. One of them tackled him from behind. Another used a baton on his ribs. The footage showed Devon trying to comply, hands up, but the beating continued until he stopped moving. Tracy's vision blurred. Why wasn't this shown at his hearing? Because the man your brother defended himself against is the nephew of a district prosecutor, Kim said flatly. The surveillance footage was lost during evidence processing. The woman your brother saved was pressured not to testify. The police reports were falsified to make your brother look like the aggressor. So he's been sitting in detention for 8 months because the system protects its own, and your brother is black, foreign, and convenient. Kim closed the laptop. But that ends today. I'm filing for immediate release based on newly discovered evidence. I'm also filing charges against the arresting officers for excessive force and against the prosecutor's office for suppressing exculpatory evidence. Can a gangster be a guardian angel? How did you get this footage? Tracy asked. You said it was lost. It was lost by people who wanted it lost. But Mr. Yang has connections in the Seoul Metropolitan Police who believe evidence should serve justice, not politics. They made a copy before the original disappeared. Completely legal. Kim smiled. It was the smile of a predator who just cornered prey. Mostly legal. What's this going to cost? The question Tracy had been avoiding. The debt she couldn't calculate. Lawyers like you don't work for free. What does Yang Di want in return? He wants you to work in his restaurant. That's the contract. 5 years minimum. Fair salary, benefits, housing assistance. In exchange, I handle your brother's case pro bono and ensure he's released with a clean record. Tracy scanned the documents Kim slid across the table. Employment contract. Standard terms, nothing obviously predatory, but there had to be something hidden. A clause she wasn't seeing, an obligation buried in legalese. What happens if I quit before 5 years? You pay market rate for my services, approximately 300 million won, plus interest. Kim said it without judgment, just facts. But if you fulfill the contract, the debt is considered paid. 300 million won. Tracy did the math, almost $250,000 US, more money than she'd earn in a decade. That's extortion. That's the cost of defending a wrongful prosecution case this complex. I don't offer discounts. Kim leaned forward. But here's what you need to understand. Mr. Young isn't doing this because he's kind. He's doing this because you saved his life and because in his world, debts of blood are paid in loyalty. 5 years of your work is cheap compared to what he could demand. What is the true price of his help? What else? Tracy asked. There's always something else. Kim hesitated, the first crack in her professional armor. You'll be working in an establishment owned by a known criminal. You'll be subjected to police surveillance, possible interrogation. Your association with Mr. Yang will make future employment difficult if you ever want to leave his organization. Organization? Tracy laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the Iron Dragon Syndicate. I'll be working for the Mafia. You'll be working in a restaurant that happens to be owned by someone with complicated business interests. Kim's tone was careful, legal. What Mr. Yang does in his private capacity is separate from the operation of Halmoni's kitchen. Except it's not separate. It never will be. Tracy stared at the contract, her brother's freedom written in clauses and stipulations. What if I say no? Then I withdraw from the case. Your brother's public defender continues as assigned. He'll likely be convicted based on falsified evidence and serve 2 to 5 years in Korean prison. After which, he'll be deported with a criminal record that destroys any chance of a normal life. The city glittered 43 floors below. Seoul in the morning, beautiful and brutal. A place where money bought justice and connections bought freedom. I need to see my brother first, Tracy said. Before I sign anything, I need to ask him if this is what he wants. Done. Kim pulled out her phone, sent a text. Detention center visit approved for this afternoon, 2 p.m. I'll have a car waiting downstairs. The Seoul Detention Center was everything Tracy had imagined and worse. Concrete walls stained by weather and despair. Guards who looked at visitors like they were already guilty. A visiting room that smelled like disinfectant trying to mask the deeper stench of institutionalized hopelessness. Devin sat across from her, separated by plexiglass. He'd lost weight, his eyes were hollow. But when he saw her, something flickered to life, hope wearing the disguise of a smile. Trace, he said through the phone receiver, his voice cracked. You look tired. You look worse. Prison chic, it's very in right now. He tried to laugh, couldn't quite manage it. How bad is it out there? The lawyer said something about new evidence, but he wouldn't tell me details. Tracy told him everything. The surveillance footage, Attorney Kim, Yang D and the poisoned burrito and the restaurant that was really a birthright disguised as fusion cuisine. She told him about the contract. 5 years of her life in exchange for his freedom. Devin listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Don't do it, he said finally. What? Don't sign. Don't trade 5 years of your life for mine. I'll survive this. I'll get through it. But if you tie yourself to a crime boss, you might not survive what comes after. You'll be convicted, deported, destroyed. I'll be alive, free eventually, but you... Devin pressed his hand against the plexiglass. Trace, you've already sacrificed too much. Our whole lives you've been protecting me from bullies, from poverty, from our own family falling apart. At some point you have to save yourself. The neon lights of the present faded into the steam of the past. Tracy was 19, standing in a hospital room. Their mother was dying, cancer that had spread too fast to stop. Devin was 15, sitting in the corner, crying silently. Take care of your brother, their mother whispered. Promise me. I promise. No. Their mother's grip tightened despite her weakness. Promise me you'll take care of yourself too. Promise me you won't lose who you are trying to save everyone else. Tracy had promised, and then broken that promise every day since, moving to Korea to help Devin with college, working multiple jobs to cover his expenses, staying in Seoul even after he graduated because he was here and family meant staying together. The sharp crack of Devin's voice snapped her back to the cold reality. I'm not letting you do this, he said firmly. I'm not worth 5 years of your life chained to a criminal organization. You're my brother. You're worth everything. Then prove it by living your own life, instead of sacrificing it for mine. They stared at each other through the plexiglass, two siblings who'd survived poverty and loss and a system designed to break people like them. Devin's eyes were fierce, certain, the same expression he'd had when he'd stepped between that woman and her attacker, the same expression that had landed him in this cell. What if I want to sign it? Tracy asked quietly. Not just for you, for me too. What are you talking about? I've spent 8 months being invisible, being scared, being small. Guillaume made me feel like I didn't matter, like I was just labor, disposable. But last night I mattered. I saved someone's life and it changed things. Yang Di is offering me a chance to matter, to build something, to prove that people like us can claim space in places that were never designed for us. Devon searched her face. You think working for a gangster is reclaiming power? I think working for someone who values loyalty over fear might be. Tracy leaned closer to the glass. He asked me to intervene when he was about to force Guillaume to eat poison. He listened when I said mercy mattered. He found this surveillance footage and hired the best lawyer in Seoul because I wrote 3 words on a napkin. That's not a monster. That's someone complicated trying to be better. Or someone manipulating you into thinking you have a choice, when really you're just trading one prison for another. Maybe, Tracy stood, but at least it's a prison with windows. At least I'm choosing to walk in instead of being dragged. That has to count for something. She signed the contract at 4 p.m. Attorney Kim witnessed with a notary public who asked no questions about why a waitress was committing 5 years of her life to a restaurant that didn't exist yet. At 6 p.m., Kim filed the motion for Devon's immediate release. By 8 p.m., a judge had reviewed the surveillance footage and issued an order vacating the conviction. By 10 p.m., Devon Rogers walked out of the Seoul detention center a free man. Tracy was waiting outside in the rain. Devon saw her and stopped. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then he crossed the distance and pulled her into a hug that felt like every promise they'd ever made to each other compressed into a single moment. "You're an idiot," he whispered. "Runs in the family." A black sedan pulled up. The window rolled down. Yang Di sat in the back, still wearing that faded hoodie, looking exactly like the vagrant Guillaume had tried to humiliate. "Tracy," he said, "and you must be Devon. I'm told you're looking for employment. I could use someone with your background in restaurant management." Devon stiffened. "I'm not working for a restaurant owned by your sister's employer," Yang Di smiled. "Different location, different concept. A gastropub in Itaewon catering to international crowds. Good salary. No obligations beyond showing up and doing excellent work. Consider it a signing bonus for your sister's contract." "I don't want your charity." "Good, because I don't offer it. I offer opportunity to people who have proven they're willing to stand up for others even when it costs them everything." Yang Di's expression hardened slightly. "You defended a stranger from assault and spent 8 months in prison because the system valued connections over justice. That tells me you have integrity. I'm betting that integrity translates to managing a business where the margins are tight and the customers are demanding." Devon looked at Tracy. She nodded slightly. He sighed. "When do I start?" "Next week, after you've rested, recovered, remembered what freedom tastes like." Yang Di handed him a business card. "Call that number Monday. We'll discuss details." The sedan pulled away, leaving them standing in the rain outside the detention center. Free, but bound by contracts that might be salvation or slow-motion imprisonment disguised as opportunity. "What did we just agree to?" Devon asked. "I have no idea," Tracy admitted. "But tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'm going to find out if a gangster can actually be a guardian angel, or if we just sold our souls to someone who's very good at making chains feel like wings." 6 months later, Halmoni's kitchen didn't look like Maison Lumiere anymore. The velvet chairs were gone, replaced by simple wooden benches worn smooth by use. The marble bar had been torn out, rebuilt with reclaimed wood from traditional Hanok houses scheduled for demolition. The floor-to-ceiling windows remained, but now they framed a different view. Not the glittering excess of Gangnam's luxury district, but the honest chaos of a neighborhood where taxi drivers and office workers and university students mixed without pretense. Tracy stood behind the counter, ladling gomtang into earthenware bowls. The cast iron pot Yang Di had recovered from storage dominated the stove, its contents simmering since 4 a.m. Beef bones turning to silk, marrow dissolving into broth. The same recipe his mother had perfected, now being served by a woman from Virginia who'd learned to pronounce Korean ingredients without butchering them. The restaurant was full. 28 seats, everyone occupied. A construction crew on lunch break. University students studying over bowls of noodles. An elderly couple who came every Tuesday for the same order they'd apparently placed at the original Halmoni's kitchen 20 years ago, before the Beaumonts stole it. Sarah worked the floor, no longer trembling when customers raised their voices. Junho managed the kitchen, his mother in remission now, color returning to her face after successful treatment at a hospital where Yang Di's connections had fast-tracked her into an experimental program. Mincy ran the register with the efficient calm of someone who'd learned that not all authority figures weaponize their power. They'd become a family, damaged, cautious, but functional in ways that Guillaume's regime of fear had never permitted. The door chimed. Tracy looked up from the broth, expecting another customer. Instead, she saw Yang Di. But not the Yang Di from 6 months ago. That man had worn a faded hoodie and moved through the world like he was expecting violence. This version wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection. His hair was styled. The tattoos on his neck were still visible, but somehow they looked different when framed by Tom Ford instead of streetwear. Less threatening, more like art museums you needed credentials to enter. He stood in the doorway, scanning the room. When his eyes found Tracy, he smiled. The real one, not the predator's grin he'd shown Guillaume. This was warm, almost shy. Has the outsider finally found a home? Table for one, Tracy called out. If you have space. Always. She gestured to booth 7, the same booth where he'd sat that night. They'd kept it unchanged as a private joke. A reminder that revolutions sometimes started with a man ordering a burrito he'd never eat. Yang Di slid into the booth, his expensive suit looking absurd against the humble wooden bench. But he seemed comfortable. More comfortable than he'd looked in the hoodie, actually. Like he'd finally stopped disguising himself. Tracy brought him water and a menu he didn't need. Business meeting or pleasure? Both. I wanted to check on my investment. Your investment is profitable. We cleared expenses in month 3, turned an actual profit in month 5. At this rate, we'll pay off the renovation costs within 18 months. I don't care about the money. I know, but I do. Because the contract says I work for you for 5 years. I'd prefer those 5 years to be in a successful restaurant, not a tax write-off you're using to launder syndicate money. Yang Di laughed. Still direct, still assuming the worst. Still realistic. Tracy set down a bowl of gomtang without being asked. You taught me that. Mercy matters, but so does clear vision about who people really are. He picked up his spoon, tested the broth. His expression shifted. Something crossed his face that looked almost like grief dressed in gratitude. It tastes like hers, exactly like hers. How did you? I found her recipe notebook. In a box with the pot, water damaged but legible. Sarah helped me translate the parts I couldn't read. Tracy sat across from him, uninvited but welcome. She wrote notes in the margins, about patience, about how good food requires good intentions, about how you can taste someone's heart in what they cook. Yang Di ate slowly, methodically, like each spoonful was communion. Around them, the restaurant hummed with conversation. Someone laughed. Someone's phone rang. The ordinary symphony of a place where people came to be fed, not impressed. This is what she wanted, he said quietly. Not fusion cuisine, not Michelin stars, just honest food served to people who appreciate it. Then mission accomplished. Tracy paused. Though I should mention Guillaume's father has been making inquiries. Yang Di's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. What kind of inquiries? Legal ones, through his attorneys, questioning the deed transfer, claiming the documentation was forged. He's filed a lawsuit challenging ownership. Of course he has. Yang Di set down his spoon. Men like the elder Beaumont don't accept loss. They just change strategies. Kim says the lawsuit is frivolous, that we have airtight documentation. But she also says litigation is expensive and designed to bleed us financially until we settle. Kim is right. It's economic warfare. Make us spend money on lawyers until maintaining this place becomes unsustainable. Yang Di pulled out his phone, typed something. I'm transferring additional operating capital, enough to fight this for years if necessary. That's not sustainable either. Eventually, he'll find a judge who owes him favors, or manufacture evidence, or I make him stop. Yang Di's voice went flat, cold. The temperature in the booth dropped despite the steam rising from the soup. One phone call, one conversation about things the elder Beaumont has done that he thinks are buried. Problems solved. Is the war really over? No, Tracy said firmly. We don't solve problems that way. Not here. This place is supposed to be different. Clean. If you start using syndicate tactics, we become exactly what Guillaume accused us of being. Guillaume was right about what I am. Maybe, but he was wrong about what this place could be. Tracy leaned forward. Your mother built something honest. She lost it to people who weaponized the law. If we use illegal methods to protect what we've rebuilt, we're just proving that the only difference between us and them is which side of legality we're willing to abandon first. Yang Di studied her. You're asking me to fight with one hand tied behind my back. I'm asking you to fight the way your mother would have wanted, through excellence, through community, through proving that good food and good intentions can survive in a city designed to crush both. That's naive. Maybe, but it's the deal we made. You wanted someone who'd choose conscience over convenience, someone who'd tell you when mercy matters. Well, mercy matters now. We fight this legally or we don't deserve what we're protecting. Yang Di was quiet for a long time. Around them, the lunch rush was ending. Customers paid and left. New ones arrived. The cycle of service continuing regardless of the tension crackling in booth 7. The elder Beaumont destroyed my mother using legal warfare, Yang Di said finally. Contracts and courts and mechanisms designed to protect people like him while crushing people like her. You're asking me to trust those same systems. I'm asking you to be better than the thing that hurt you. What if being better means losing? Then we lose honestly. Tracy met his eyes. But I don't think we will, because we have something the Beaumonts don't. We have a reason to fight that goes deeper than money or pride. We're protecting a legacy. His lawsuit is just protecting his ego. Yang Di's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. Diho says there's been an incident. One of our distribution warehouses was raided. Police found irregularities in our import licenses. Coincidence? There are no coincidences. The elder Beaumont has connections in customs enforcement. This is him escalating, attacking the syndicate to pressure me into abandoning the restaurant. So what do? What I always do. I make the problem expensive for him until he decides I'm not worth the trouble. Yang Di stood. I have to go, crisis management, but we'll continue this conversation. Wait, Tracy pulled something from her apron pocket, an envelope. This came this morning, addressed to you, hand-delivered, no return address. Yang Di opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, his mother's restaurant, the original Halmoni's kitchen, before the theft, before the Beaumonts, before everything. She stood in front of the stove, smiling at the camera, holding that cast iron pot. There was a note on the back in shaky handwriting. Korean characters Tracy couldn't read. What does it say? She asked. Yang Di's jaw tightened. It says, your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. Some legacies are better left buried. He flipped the photo over again, staring at his mother's face. It's signed by the elder Beaumont. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too exposed. The windows that showed the neighborhood also meant anyone could see in, could watch, could plan. He's trying to provoke you, Tracy said. Make you do something reckless, something that gives him leverage. It's working. Then don't let it. Honor your mother by protecting what she built, not by becoming the violence that destroyed her. Yang Di slipped the photograph into his jacket pocket. You make it sound simple. Choose honor over revenge. Choose the high road. But the high road doesn't win wars, Tracy. It just gives you a better view of the battlefield while you're losing. Maybe, or maybe it means you're fighting a different war than the one your enemy expects. She stood, meeting him at eye level. The elder Beaumont wants you to retaliate with syndicate tactics, wants you to prove you're just a thug with pretensions. Don't give him that satisfaction. Beat him by being exactly what he can't comprehend, someone who has power but chooses restraint. And if restraint gets us destroyed, then we go down fighting the right way, and at least we'll know we didn't sacrifice your mother's values to save her restaurant. The neon lights of the present faded into the steam of the past. Yang Di was 12, standing in the hospital room. His mother was dying. The monitors beeped steadily, counting down her remaining heartbeats like a clock winding down. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you won't become what hurt us." Young Yang Di had promised, but he'd broken that promise in ways both large and small, built an empire on violence, commanded loyalty through fear, became exactly the kind of power his mother had warned him against. But standing here, in the restaurant he'd reclaimed, serving his mother's recipe to people who appreciated it, maybe this was the promise he should have kept. Maybe redemption wasn't dramatic. Maybe it was just gomtang simmering in a cast iron pot while the city outside forgot to be cruel for a few hours. The sharp crack of the door chiming snapped him back to the cold reality. Di-ho entered, his expression grim. "Hyungnam, we have a situation. The elder Beaumont isn't just suing. He's made threats against the staff. Against," he glanced at Tracy, "against people under your protection." Yang Di's expression went cold. "Specifics." Anonymous messages to Tracy's apartment. Photos of Devon leaving his gastropub. Surveillance photos of Sarah's family. He's making it clear that if you don't walk away from this building, people will get hurt. The restaurant had emptied during their conversation. Jun-ho was closing the kitchen. Min-seo was counting the register. Sarah was wiping down tables, normal end-of-service routines, but Yang Di could see the fear beneath the normalcy. They knew. They all knew that working here meant being targets. "What do you want me to do?" Di-ho asked. Yang Di looked at Tracy. She was standing very still, processing, calculating, the same expression she'd worn when deciding whether to warn him about the poison. "Tracy," he said quietly, "this is what I was trying to protect you from. The elder Beaumont won't stop until he wins or I make him stop, and making him stop requires methods you won't approve of. Then find methods I will approve of. There aren't any, not in this situation. Then we evacuate, close temporarily, get everyone somewhere safe while we figure this out legally. Running proves we're vulnerable. It invites escalation. And fighting your way proves you're exactly what he says you are." They stared at each other across the empty restaurant, two people who'd started as strangers and become something more complicated. Employer and employee, protector and protected. Two outsiders trying to build sanctuary in a city that specialized in tearing down anyone who didn't fit predetermined categories. "I can end this tonight," Yang Di said. "One meeting, one negotiation that involves leverage he can't ignore. By morning, the lawsuit disappears. The threats stop. We go back to making soup." "And what does that leverage look like?" "You don't want to know. Try me." Yang Di pulled out his phone, showed her a file, photos of the elder Beaumont, with women who weren't his wife, at properties that weren't legally owned, accepting payments that weren't reported to tax authorities, the accumulated evidence of 20 years of corruption compiled by investigators who specialized in finding what people wanted hidden. "Blackmail," Tracy said. "Insurance," Yang Di corrected. "I give him copies. Explain that if anything happens to this restaurant or anyone connected to it, the files go to prosecutors who owe me more favors than they owe him. Mutually assured destruction. He leaves us alone. We leave him alone. Everyone survives." "That's not justice." "No, it's survival disguised as peace, which is the best we get in this world." Tracy looked at the photos, at evidence of crimes that deserved prosecution, at leverage that could protect her friends but compromised everything she'd been fighting for. "If you do this," she said slowly, "if you use blackmail instead of courts, you prove that the legal system doesn't work, that the only real power is the willingness to fight dirty." "The legal system doesn't work," Yang Di said. "It protects people like the elder Beaumont and crushes people like my mother. I'm just using the tools available." "Or you're becoming what killed her." The words landed like a slap. Yang Di's expression hardened. "Be very careful what you say next." "Why? Because you'll threaten me. Add me to your collection of people controlled through fear and obligation." Tracy stepped closer. I signed a contract. 5 years. I'm here legally. But if you use that file, I'm gone. I'll pay back everyone you've spent on my brother's case. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. But I won't be part of an organization that abandons principle the moment it becomes inconvenient. You'd walk away. Let everyone here become targets because you're too pure to compromise. I'd walk away because if we compromise now, we'll compromise forever. And eventually, this place becomes just another front for the same corruption that killed your mother. Different name, same poison. Yangdi and Tracy stood in the empty restaurant, the cast iron pot cooling on the stove, the city glittering beyond the windows, and the weight of an impossible choice pressing down like the sky deciding whether to rain or clear. And somewhere in Gangnam, a man who'd stolen everything was waiting to see if his threats would work, or if the woman who'd written 3 words on a napkin 6 months ago still believed that mercy could survive in a world designed to kill it.